Hey, good evening. Welcome back to another episode of Studio 118. My name is Reuben. This is Bunjee to my left.
Hey.
Hey, indeed.
Hey.
We're back, and man, we got so much going on in the world today, but
So much.
yeah, but we are we're focusing on a very controversial issue this evening, topic of abortion. We already have an old episode, by the way. If you jump on our Studio 118 YouTube channel, you can view our past episodes, and one of them we already did on the topic of abortion, so we invite you to go see that. But first and foremost, let me, before we get into our discussion, let me get some admin stuff out of the way. By the way, Studio 118, of course, as we always do, it's brought to you by Isaiah chapter 1, verse 18, "Come, let us reason." And we're here to tackle tough topics, so to break it down for you all, the audience, and hopefully you can have some fruitful conversations as a result. And we're broadcasting live here, streaming off of YouTube here at Calvary South Austin. Just to let you know, we are a church. We meet on Wednesday evenings and on Sunday mornings. We invite you to join us here on Sunday mornings at 9:15 a.m. and 11:15 a.m., as well as on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. If you'd like more information about who we are and what we do, you can jump on our website, go to calvarysouthAustin.com. You can also check out past teachings from Pastor Bunjee here. And if you have any questions that you'd like to know what we're about, feel free to call our church. That number is 512-576-5433. And as always, we have the live chat going there on our YouTube live stream, so jump on, say hi. But also we have a Q&A portion after our discussion time is over, and we'd love to hear your thoughts about if you have any clarifying questions that you need cleared up, or if you just want to join in on the conversation and you'd love to hear our thoughts on the matter, feel free to jump there on the live chat and submit your question. We are also streaming to Austin Cable Access Channel 11, so if you want to submit a question there, if you're watching on Cable Access Channel 11, you can call in your question. Again, that number is 512-576-5433. So we'd love to hear you. And again, share the stream link to all your social media platforms. Please, we'd love to have more people join in on the conversation. We'd love to hear people from all different backgrounds and thoughts. And we just would love to hear what other people have to think about this topic, especially this topic that we have tonight. Again, it's on the topic of abortion. Bunjee, as you know, and a lot of people out there know, abortion is back in the headlines. It's the topic du jour, so to speak.
Yes, I don't know that I would say that, but
yes, there's a lot of stuff going on.
And we had the Politico
Yep.
group, the Politico Media Group, leak that 98-page document. Mm-hmm. Written by Justice Samuel Alito, which appears to at least be a possible overturning of Roe v. Wade. Yeah. And so, people are flipping out.
Yes, people are definitely flipping out. I see a lot of commotion going on social media. A lot of people are up in arms and just wondering what to do next, and we'll talk about that.
And it has yet to be seen whether this is an actual document written by Samuel Alito or not. Now, Chief Justice Roberts did call for an investigation, which seems to give some credibility that this really is the majority opinion of the Supreme Court. So, but we're still waiting to see if this actually gets released. And my understanding is that it should be by June. Yeah. But we'll see.
Yeah, that just goes to show you, right? No matter what is the case here, whether it was an actual draft or, whatever happened with that leak, but the reaction goes to show you that the nation is not, this matter is not settled by any means.
No, it's not.
We see protests already happening, especially outside the justices' houses.
Which is a federal crime.
Which is a federal crime, yes. Which, let's see if that gets enforced. Even today, we learned about a protest happening at a local high school right across the street from us.
Right.
And, apparently there's even young students that are up in arms. I don't really know how they feel about the matter, but there was a protest nonetheless. And so, this matter is not settled. It is very much on the minds of a lot of Americans,
right.
And we're eager to tackle this tough topic and hopefully break it down in simple terms as to what exactly is the matter, what's going on, what are the implications if Roe v. Wade gets overturned, what can Christians do as a matter going forward in order to win hearts and minds, right?
And to that, I would just say, how dare you?
Greta, you're going to Greta me?
How dare you?
That was the earliest you've ever Greta'd.
Yeah, I mean, just out of the chute, we need to address the fact that here's two men.
Yes.
Two men weighing in on what a woman should do with her body. And of course, we will address that.
Yeah.
But it would be good, for the audience to understand that this does not, we understand this. We get it that, there are those who would immediately dismiss our point of view simply because of our gender. And
it's actually your lack of uterus, not your gender.
True.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, I forget about that.
Yeah.
I don't know how to live in 2022. But yeah, so we will address this, and it is good to remember though that the Roe decision was written and weighed in by 5 men. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if we don't get an opinion because we're men, then are you also willing to throw out Roe? Because that was written and decided by 5 men.
Yeah, that's the first challenge alert. There you go.
There you
go. No, it's a very good question to throw out, and we'll be bringing up a lot of these objections throughout our episode here.
Yep.
But, I think it's worth, because as I mentioned, we did already tackle this topic in a previous episode over a year ago.
Yes.
And that was back when I believe Justice Amy Coney Barrett was going to get confirmed.
Yes.
And that was when a lot of the cries about, if you nominate her and she gets, approved, then
doomsday.
It's doomsday. Yeah.
It's doomsday.
And so we wanted to tackle that at that time. And we discussed a lot of topics during that episode. We started off with, does religion belong in politics? We also went through the history of Roe v. Wade and also Planned Parenthood v. Casey. And then we turned our attention to, what are the biblical principles that we can find that talk about life,
yes.
Of the unborn, mm-hmm. and the value of life. And then we address a lot of the common abortion arguments. We'll probably repeat some today, but we see a lot of them being thrown out again. A lot of the common ones that just won't leave the public arena there. So we did a lot in that last episode, but there's still much more to be talked about in this episode. And as you already added a caveat about, we're already 2 men here talking about the topic, but I think it also bears worth repeating, as we did in the last episode, about we understand that some of our audience, there's possibly women out there that have had an abortion that are listening to this currently, and they're probably eagerly waiting to see what we're going to say on the topic, and perhaps there are some of those that are a little bit more skeptical and already looking at us and just waiting for the condemnation remarks to come. And we're here to quell that and just say there's no condemnation from either of us, speaking as Christians, people, sinners just like everyone else that have been saved by the grace, the blood of Jesus Christ. We have there's no condemnation. We are not lording it over anybody, but we're here to say that as with any other sin, as with any other immoral act, there is forgiveness that comes from Christ.
That's right.
I believe it says in Romans chapter 8, those who are in Christ Jesus, there's therefore now no condemnation.
That's right.
And I believe that's just worth emphasizing here.
Yeah, I don't know about your background on this, prior to Christ, but I was pro-choice throughout my youth, all the way up until I was 26. So I spent a good chunk of my younger years supporting the pro-choice position. So I've been on the other side of this argument and supported that. And then after becoming a Christian, after studying the scriptures and being challenged about this matter, I did come to the place where I switched over to the pro-life camp because of what the the Bible says, because of the philosophical arguments that convinced me to recognize that life begins in the womb, because of the science that really settled it for me as well. So my conversion, if you will, to from pro-choice to pro-life, it was multifaceted, on a religious level, on a philosophical level, as well as on a scientific level. But knowing that I spent many years in the pro-choice camp, I would just appeal to the audience and just say, look, I was on the other side of this. And I know that whatever my hands were involved in any of that, I'm completely forgiven by faith in Jesus Christ, and that's the confidence that we want everyone to have. If you've been in the pro-choice camp, if you've had an abortion, if you've paid for an abortion, if you've had your hand involved in any of this, that there is complete forgiveness in Christ Jesus. And Paul tells us that when we're in Christ, old things have passed away, and behold, all things have become new, and so we can rejoice in that.
Yeah, amen. And yeah, we serve a God and worship a God who is love, as 1 John 4:9 tells us. We also know that scriptures tell us that love covers a multitude of sins. And as you mentioned, God's love and forgiveness is transformative. And so this is the heart that we're coming with. We are going to speak and vigorously and defend our position, which we believe that life, no matter what stage of development it is valuable. It has inherent worth because it is a bearer of the image of God.
Yeah.
And we're going to vigorously defend that, not just with Scripture, but based on the evidence that we have at hand today, scientifically speaking and philosophically speaking, as well as biblical. But please don't, audience member, if you're out there skeptical, please don't mistake that for being judgmental or adding condemnation to any individual woman who has had an abortion. That's not where we're coming from. But we do believe that there is a time and a place in order to defend and debate these issues, and that's why we invite people who are obviously not even on our side of the issue to join in on the conversation. Call in, submit your questions, and we'd love to have that conversation with you. If you'd love to have even a more personal chat on the matter, email us or call the church, and we'd love to hear from you. And again, just lay out our defense of the position. But more importantly, we'd love to show you the Christ, the God that we know that has forgiven us of many other sins aside from abortion or what have you. And This is the God that we serve. So one thing we also do want to mention is if you're out there and you have had an abortion or perhaps you're considering an abortion, we want to let you know that abortion is not the only choice. And it shouldn't be even a choice on the plate, because there are other viable alternatives. Number one, we'd love to point you to centers and people who would love to adopt your child, first and foremost, who would love to take your child into their home and care for that child as if it is their own. And also there are pregnancy resource centers that can help you out, that can give you the support and a lot of the resources that you need in order to help you make that choice and choose life. And so you can see your little one there on an ultrasound and see the life that is within your womb, and also guide you into a path that will lead you to give birth to that beautiful little child, and then even help you after the fact. I know a lot of one of the big objections that we hear is, well, you only care about life when it's inside the womb, before it's born, but what are you doing for the children that after they're born? And we know that is a big obstacle to overcome. But these pregnancy resource centers, that's what exactly why they exist, because they want to help mothers during all stages of pregnancy and even afterwards, in helping you with pointing you to housing, where to get food, where to even get employment, and even help you in getting diapers and whatnot. So
even we as a church have donated resources to the True Care Pregnancy Center here in Austin, Texas, and around Christmas time, we'll tend to put together, whatever their needs are, and we'll try to meet those needs as much as possible, whether it be strollers or diapers or formula.
Yeah.
The gold standard of formula now, I guess, is
what is it?
I guess
it's rarer
I think
than gold.
Bill Gates is coming up with his own brand, isn't he? But yeah, so we, even as a church and many other churches out there, love to support these pregnancy centers. That encourage pregnant women to go ahead and give birth, and if they don't have the resources to take care of the child, to give the child up for adoption, so the child can have a wonderful life.
Yeah, so you see that slide that's up there on your screen, perhaps, and it's giving the details on how to contact the True Care Pregnancy Resource Center, and this is just one that's located here in Austin near us. But feel free to call our church again if you need, if you live somewhere else and you're looking for information on how to reach other crisis pregnancy centers or pregnancy resource centers. So go ahead and do that. But this is just one piece of response to those who say, hey, put your money where your mouth is, basically. And this is what at least our little church is trying to do, and say, hey, we do value life, and this is the way we show it. We actually go and donate and support these mothers that are in need. So. And not to mention, that this is not just a one-party issue, right? There's also a father that's involved. I think that bears worth mentioning.
Yep.
Fathers, a lot of times when they find out that, a significant other had an abortion, it rocks their world as well. And so there should be support for fathers as well. And so if you're a father out there who is still dealing with the aftermath of your significant other having an abortion, again, call our church, and we'd love to just pray with you, counsel you, and just help you get back into a place where you can understand God's will in all of this, and God's plan for your life going forward. So, this is not just a one-party issue. Speaking of one-person issue, and so we'd love to reach out to anybody who is willing to listen and willing to have a rational conversation about this controversial topic. We understand it. There's big flame wars happening, especially on social media. So you would think that everybody's just kind of ready and ready to kind of draw swords, if you will. But that's not what we're coming at here. And so we're willing to have a conversation with those who are willing to hear, and we're willing to hear the other side as well. So that's our spiel on that.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying there, as far as every child, comes from a father and a mother. You've got 23 chromosomes from both father and mother, and so, when this issue just becomes about, well, it's the woman who carries the burden of 9 months of pregnancy, therefore the decision is entirely hers, that really is unfair to the person who, has 23 chromosomes also invested in this life. And so, without wanting to take away the burden, the pain, the inconvenience of a 9-month-long pregnancy, there still are two people involved in the creation of this new person. And I believe that both parties' opinion are equally valuable in that decision process, which then kind of brings you to the challenge of, hey, listen, if this guy isn't ready to commit to raising a child with you, then you might want to think twice about having a physical relationship with that individual.
Yeah.
But we can get more into that
for sure.
as we continue.
Yeah, we're all good points to bring up. So why don't we move, Bunjee, into talking about essentially what are we dealing with today? How did we end up at this point where Roe v. Wade might be overturned or not? And that's where we turn our attention into the case that is before the Supreme Court and what they're considering, and whether or not Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey remain constitutional. Okay, and this is the case that is before the Supreme Court is known as Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. And this was argued back in December of last year, so it's not too long ago.
Right.
But essentially, it goes even further back than that. In 2018, Mississippi had passed a law called the Gestational Age Act, and that prohibited all abortions, with few exceptions, after 15 weeks of gestational age. And usually you see laws that are passed that have been incrementally kind of pushing that back. It started off with 24, 23 weeks, which was for some reason considered the age of viability. But slowly you have other states that are kind of been testing that boundary and pushing it further and further back, mainly due to a lot of medical advances that we've seen, and we'll definitely get into that.
We've seen preemies who were born at 20 weeks survive, yeah, growing up and becoming healthy, individuals. So, there's babies that have survived, at 20 weeks of birth. And so, yeah, and then there's the heartbeat bills. And, but I do find this Gestational Age Act, I find it to be very reasonable. I would say not enough. I would want an even stronger law. But 15 weeks, the baby's very developed at that point in time. I think we have a graph up here or an image of the different stages of development there. But there you see, I guess that just, let's see, where are we at?
Yeah, it's almost 4 months, yeah.
So you've got about a 4 month, the beginning of the second trimester. That looks human to me.
Yes.
That looks like a little baby.
Here I have that at about 15 weeks, your baby will measure around about 4 inches from the head to the bottom, and will weigh about 2.5 ounces, which is roughly the same size as an apple. At 15 weeks, your baby's breathing and digestive systems are becoming more advanced. They already have fingerprints, mind you. They're already showing movement, but within their breathing and digestive systems are becoming more advanced. They're using swallowing and sucking abilities to breathe in amniotic fluid, and then the bones of your baby's skeleton are hardening, and the muscle tissue continues to develop. The baby can straighten out more now with stronger muscles and sturdier bones. And the hearing as well at this stage is developing too. At the end of this week, he or she may be able to hear your heart beating and your tummy gurgling. So there's already a lot of complex development at this early stage at 15 weeks.
Right.
And they're showing signs of being responsive at certain times. So this is this is pretty advanced. And so this is not, just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with, this is a baby.
Yeah.
This is a live human being.
Here's a wonderful graphic right here,
Yeah.
just a designed graphic of what a 4-month-old, unborn baby, preborn baby looks like. I don't know how anybody could look at this and say, yeah, that's okay to abort right there.
Yeah.
So 15 weeks, this gestational act is completely reasonable, just based on, just the development of this, of the baby at that point in time.
Yeah, and so as with a lot of these laws that have been being passed in certain states, you always hear, you get pushback and objections from the abortion facilities within that state. Now, Mississippi only had one licensed abortion facility.
That's right.
And they were, of course, in, what do you call it? They were in danger of losing a lot of their money, basically, because that's where they get the most of their money.
Right.
So they filed a lawsuit in federal district court challenging the law, and they requested a restraining order. They got it granted, and essentially they motioned for summary judgment, and they got it. And so the district court enjoined Mississippi from enforcing the law, finding that the state had not provided evidence that a fetus would be viable at 15 weeks based on precedent from Roe. And Supreme Court precedent prohibits the states from banning abortions prior to viability. And so the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit had affirmed this decision. So then it reaches the Supreme Court, and now the question is, before the Supreme Court is, well, is the Mississippi law banning nearly all abortions after 15 weeks unconstitutional?
Yep.
And so this strikes right at the heart of Roe, because that was always the limitation on viability.
Yeah, that really is the issue here, is Roe versus Wade constitutional law? Is it settled law? And I would argue, no, I don't think there's any reason to think that it is. And especially as we get into the history of it, so you have Roe v. Wade decided based on the precedent that was set by Griswold, which was a right to privacy argument that had to do with whether a married couple can in the privacy of their own home use contraception, and so from there you see the decision kind of the Constitution 14th Amendment right to due process, and kind of from this you have these penumbras emanating from the emanations that from this we have this right to privacy. And so therefore it's okay for a married couple to use contraception in the privacy of their own home, right?
Yeah.
And so from that precedent, so then that becomes precedent, right to privacy, which you don't really see that spelled out plainly in the language of the 14th Amendment. Right. But they kind of created from the penumbras of the emanations of the 14th Amendment this right to privacy, which then became precedent, and then that was then later used in Roe to say, well, then a woman should have the right to privacy in a conversation that she has with her doctor about whether to abort her baby or not. And then that became precedent once it was agreed upon. But in fact, all this really was the Supreme Court acting like legislators.
Yes, and that's where we need to kind of, to help our audience understand, right? There's a lot of gears turning here. There's a lot of things happening in order to kind of prop up Roe v. Wade and the ultimate decision that was made. So you're starting off from the basis that there was precedent that the Supreme Court justices of Roe v. Wade that issued the majority opinion that they were depending upon. And it was this idea of right to privacy. And that idea of right to privacy was kind of created out of thin air, but
come on,
there was rationalization.
It's penumbras from the emanations. I mean, you can say thin air if you like, but
I prefer ether.
You either like that or you don't.
Yeah, nice. So this right to privacy that was argued, and once it reaches an opinion document, it now is based on like stare decisis and using these precedents as, hey, we're gonna prefer precedent where we can, but in issues of the Constitution, where we'll take that into consideration, but it's not going to be set forth in stone. But anyways, once you had this right to privacy idea being written into a document now, an official document, now they can use that as precedent. So that's what these Supreme Court justices used. And then looking at the 14th Amendment, just for those who don't know, the 14th Amendment here states that at least let me go ahead and read the whole thing. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws.
Yes.
So there's no explicit mention of right to privacy.
No, it's in the due process part of that. So this is Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. It definitely supports our right to life, liberty, and property, and that can't be taken away from you without due process. Well, if they were to take Roe straight back to the 14th Amendment, if they would have said, okay, instead of taking the scenic route through Griswold, instead of trying to, create some new precedent from a precedent, so now Roe v. Wade is actually a second precedent from, so it's a precedent built upon a precedent, built upon an interpretation of the emanations coming from the penumbras of the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
No, this is ridiculous. This is just a Supreme Court trying to legislate new law. Mm-hmm. But using what they can to do that, right? Because they're not legislators. We've got three branches that are supposed to have checks and balances. So when the Supreme Court comes along and then creates new law, for example, Roe v. Wade, where now every state has to allow for abortion. Well, this is just the Supreme Court. It's basically judicial supremacy, forcing new legislation onto every American, without the correct process or procedures for creating new laws. So you've got Roe v. Wade, which becomes precedent, but it's a precedent set upon an interpretation of the emanations from the penumbras of the 14th Amendment. And from this, they should have just taken Roe v. Wade and gone back to the 14th Amendment and shown from the 14th Amendment a new precedent for establishing the right to take a life. Because if you notice in the 14th Amendment, what it says is that we're going to protect your right to life except through a due process. So, for example, if you get arrested for a murder charge, or you're a mass murderer, and they decide to put you on trial, and death penalty is part of the prosecution or possible punishment. Well, then the due process is you go through the court system. If you're found guilty, and then the judge determines that death penalty is the proper punishment, that's due process, and so your life can now be taken away from you because the due process of the court system determined you're guilty of murder, and therefore you're going to suffer the death penalty, right? Well, what baby gets this due process?
So, okay, now that's the kind of where it takes a turn. So, again, we have this right to privacy, and the second issue, which you already explained, is what is the role of the Supreme Court, the judicial branch?
Yes.
It is not to legislate, which is what they wound up doing. There was no conversation being had between the citizenry and the legislative branch in order to say, hey, this is what the citizens want. Let's vote on it and let's codify it into law.
Right.
Rather, what they did was, I think they call it like judicial review or legislating from the bench, and through their decision, essentially made kind of a federal precedent, if you will.
I
and
won't.
Basically saying now the states can't do anything about it. So that's the second issue. And now you have, okay, and this is what they wrestled with in their opinion is, well, we know that what is in the, or we have an idea of what is in the womb. That's what makes it tricky, is that if there's a right to privacy emanating from the 14th Amendment, what do you do with what's inside the womb?
Right.
And they refused, in a very cowardly way, in my opinion, if you read the opinion, to determine whether or not what is in the womb is a person or not. And then notice I use this specific word, person.
That's right.
It is a human being, biologically speaking, but they want to make this distinction of, well, we don't know its personhood status. And so we'll leave, that's not for us to opine upon, and we'll leave that for future generations, basically. But as it stands right now, there exists a right to privacy such that the mother's right to privacy supersedes whatever's in the womb. And so they wrestled with that in this opinion, which nobody ever talks about. And it wound up becoming, basically federal law at that point. And so there's three issues, all these things working together in order to prop Roe v. Wade decision up. And what we're making the case for is that from the get-go, it was just bad reasoning, bad legal reasoning, to the point where even legal scholars to this day, even from back then when the decision was made, they knew this was not a good reasoned defense in order to pass Roe v. Wade.
Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg admitted, I think it was back in like 96 or something, where she, basically said that, this is basically a branch that reached out too far and is not going to support, what it claims to support. So basically the quote leads you to realize that while she agreed with Roe v. Wade's decision, she thought it was reaching for too far, that it should have just, she wished it would have stayed to just the Texas law, that Roe v. Wade would have just settled the Texas case and not reached to the federal or to the national level, because it was a branch that reached out way too far to actually encompass the entire nation, and pretty much assumed that it would crumble. That's what we see happening.
In that leaked draft from Alito, and this quote has been around even before this, but he essentially refers to this quote from a prominent constitutional scholar.
Yes.
Who wrote that he would vote for a statute very much like the one the court ended up drafting if he were a legislator. But his assessment of Roe was memorable and brutal, where he said Roe was not constitutional law at all and gave almost no sense of an obligation to try to be. That's how badly reasoned it was. You have a person who would vote for to secure abortion into law if he had the chance as a legislator, but he understood that what the Supreme Court justices of that day in 1973, the way they reasoned to their conclusions was just horrible, and it should never have seen the light of day.
And the people on the pro-choice side of this, those in the Biden administration, are now scrambling to try to pass this law. That's what we just saw voted upon.
Yeah, this week what we saw was, the House Democrats, along party lines, basically, they tried passing what's known as I'm looking for it. Is it the Women's Healthcare Protection Act?
Yep.
Sorry, I'm looking for it.
So
if you find it,
that's their attempt to legislate this, this abortion law. They're now trying to do the work of legislation that the Supreme Court tried to force upon us back in 1973.
Yeah.
Right. So now they realize that, this thing's crumbling around us, and so they rush to try to pass through the Women's Health Protection Act, and it failed. Yeah,
which if you look at what they were actually trying to pass, it wasn't really just codifying Roe v. Wade into law, the old democratic process way. It actually went much, much further. So much so that you have even the one Democrat who kind of saved this thing in the Senate, Joe Manchin from West Virginia. He even publicly stated that this just goes too far. It essentially, if you look at the wording of the act that the bill they were trying to pass, it was basically saying no state or any governmental entity should even try to remotely interfere in a woman trying to access abortion. And they were also trying to make it even easier to access abortifacients like the abortion pill, so that you don't even have to go into a doctor's office. Just call or do a telemedicine visit, get some pills delivered to you, and voila, you have an abortion on demand. And so, and also they were trying to legislate so that you can have an abortion at any time during your pregnancy, even up to the moment of birth. So as long as that baby is not out of your uterus, it can be aborted that time. So this is a very radical bill that they were trying to pass, and thankfully it didn't. It did pass in the House, but the Senate put a stop to that. But now, of course, this is the sad thing, is that a very personal and private, and a lot of times for a lot of women, a very traumatic experience is being politicized this way, such that really they knew that Senate Democrats, is what I'm saying, they knew this wasn't going to pass, but they wanted it to basically show that people voted for it and how people voted for it. Now they can go and say, well, it was the Republicans' fault, and now they have ways to get funds donated to them and whatnot.
Oh, sure. I mean, the whole leak, in my opinion, it was one just big smokescreen to distract you from everything that's going wrong right now, including the inability to find baby formula on the shelves of the grocery store. I mean, we've got inflation, 40-year record high inflation. Of course, I mean, we're all struggling with the cost of everything. And how do you distract from this? How do you distract from the public approval of Biden just tanking, just dropping every day? Like, how do you distract from that? Oh, well, you got to get a hot topic, hot button topic, and get it out there and get people all stirred up over it. And that's exactly what we've seen happen since someone just so happened to leak what looks like Alito's decision about Dobbs, which then could possibly overturn Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which is a decision that's based on the precedent of a precedent.
Yeah. How does that go again?
Yes. It's like Inception, It's a precedent within a precedent within a precedent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen children's books like the Rains on Kapiti Plain, where it just goes all the way back to the beginning. If somebody knows that, holler at us on the live chat there. But yes, we're trying to establish here that Roe v. Wade, from its inception, was always bad law.
And I wouldn't even say law. I would say bad precedent.
Bad precedent. It
was never a law.
And so this goes straight to the heart of that objection, which a lot of abortion supporters will throw at you and say, but abortion is a constitutional right. And what they're referring to is the opinion of Supreme Court justices from Roe v. Wade, which, as we now know, is just bad reasoning.
It's a precedent built upon a precedent, built upon the penumbras of the emanations of the 14th Amendment. And so then this brings up the whole issue of the mob rules mentality, the popular vote. And so the minute you point out that this is not constitutional, nowhere in the Constitution do we find the right to terminate the unborn baby, right? That terminology is not found anywhere in our Constitution, nowhere in the Bill of Rights, nowhere in the rest of the amendments. It's not found. It's been created out of thin air.
If I could just interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
In fact, what we did in the last episode was, I believe we brought forth a case to show that, historically speaking, if you look at the writings of a lot of the early leaders and founding fathers, there was this inherent understanding that right to protect life and liberty and pursuit of happiness included the unborn. So they had this understanding that when they were talking about humans or persons, it would have included the unborn as well.
Yes, of course.
Even based on their limited understanding about, what happens inside the womb.
Right. They don't have the ultrasound technology that we have today, nor did they have it in 1973 to the degree that we have it today. The technology that allows us to see, what's happening there in the womb has advanced so much since 1973. Back in 1973, you would get this sonogram picture, this little black and white, scan of the belly, and kind of what's, the shadows of what, the
penumbras of the emanation,
the penumbras of the emanations of the fetus, But now we've got this wonderful, ultrasound technology that really gives us a much clearer glimpse at what's happening in the womb, and it's just incredible. And so just based on what the scientific advancements since 1973, on that alone, Norma McCorvey, Jane Roe, wanted to overturn the case that was in her pseudonym,
That's right.
Jane Roe. Because of the medical advancements that she was aware of, she went back to the Supreme Court, I think this was back in 2004, and wanted the case in her pseudonym overturned. And they wouldn't even entertain it. They wouldn't even listen to her, right? But then this brings up the whole, is there ever a precedent for overturning precedent?
Yeah.
Is there? I mean, do we see any reason to think that there are times when previous precedent must be overruled, that the concept of stare decisis is something that we have to just kind of let go because we realize now that the decision that was made prior was the wrong decision?
Well, let me think about this.
Let's see.
Tough one.
Alien versus Predator versus.
Yeah. I think what you're going to say is Brown versus Board of Education.
That's right, yeah.
Which made the separate but
not
equal.
Alien versus Predator. That's a movie.
That's in the future.
But Brown versus Board of Education.
Yeah, which made segregation legal. Separate but equal is what we saw in the schools, right?
So that was an overturning of a precedent. The Dred Scott decision.
Yes, and I was just going to mention right here is because I can already hear, opposers saying right away, how dare you compare abortion to the issue of like civil rights, or if you want to go even further back, slavery, right? And so it's always kind of like a gut response of like, no, it's not the same. It's not the same. And what I've always wanted to say about that, given the opportunity, is that we need to understand how analogies work. we're not saying the two are exactly the same, and we're not comparing them, one for one. But what we're doing is, in an analogy, is you compare the stronger points, the kind of underlying moral principles. That's what we're looking at. So what we're saying is there precedent to show that bad laws get overturned, and that's a good thing? And what we're showing here is that in Brown v. Board of Education, which codified segregation into our school system, that was rightfully overturned eventually. And so you can't tell me today that, just because something is legal should always remain so, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I understand, because abortion is a topic that you agree with if you're an abortion supporter, but you stand on very shaky ground the moment you start saying, just because it's legal, therefore I can't have an opinion against it, or I can't fight against it. So there's always been laws on the books that were immoral to begin with, and we have rightfully taken those off the books because they were immoral to begin with. So yes, that's what we're talking about. We're not trying to, say abortion is the same as slavery. That's just unreasonable. We're using an analogy here.
But then, to move us a little closer to the comparison, when when slaves were treated as chattel, it's because their personhood was diminished. Mm-hmm. That was one of the basis. That was one of the concepts of slavery, is that these aren't really people. These aren't really persons in the same way that we are, right? So it's okay to own them. It's okay to, do these sorts of things. And that was the argument that you saw within the Democratic Party in support of slavery, mm-hmm. right? Well, that's the argument that they're making for aborting babies, is that, it's not really a person.
Yeah.
And because there's no real personhood here, it's okay to abort them. So there is even a closer similarity there in the basis for the decision. And so once again, much like, the precedent for these earlier decisions was then overturned once clearer heads won the day, I believe that's what we're seeing now.
Right.
And those who diminish the personhood of others always find themselves on the wrong side of history. And with that, I would encourage those who are on the wrong side of history right now to come to grips with it and deal with it and move to the camp where we recognize the personhood of the living organism, the human being that's in that womb. And we'll talk more about personhood later.
Yeah, I think we will definitely touch on that. But you're getting more to the point of, do we have precedent of bad law being overturned?
Is there precedent for overturning precedent?
Right.
And there is.
Yep.
We've seen it happen many times, and the reason why is because, people came along after the fact and said, "Oh, that was a bad decision.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and get rid of that," despite the fact that there is precedent.
Yeah.
That law created precedent that set us in the wrong direction. We need to correct this now. Mm-hmm. And so those who say, "Well, Roe v. Wade is established. It's a decision. It's precedent." Well, that doesn't mean it was correct. And then that brings us to the popular vote. Well, the majority of Americans think this is okay, so therefore it is.
Yes. We recently saw, I saw a clip of Elizabeth Warren, Senator Elizabeth Warren.
I'm angry.
I don't know what she was walking out
angry.
of. She was walking with purpose. I am angry. And she was angry, I think.
She was angry.
But she's saying Republicans have been cultivating slowly or something like that for this moment, this very day or something like that. But she was trying to make the case that 60-some% of Americans are pro-choice. And say, that's interesting. Is it really that much that this many Americans are pro-choice? And maybe that's it. Maybe mob rule, basically. Majority rules is, as long as we have a majority of something that latches onto a certain topic, then we need to support it. What say you, Bunjee?
Oh no, I would take strong issue against that mentality, because really, in the words of Black Sabbath, this is just a mob rules mentality. So
Black Sabbath with the wisdom.
So, in the words of Ozzy Osbourne, but
crazy
Sharon. But no, but seriously, our country is not a pure democracy. And this is something, and by pure, what I mean to say is that it's just straight up democracy.
51% rules the day.
51%. If the opinion of the populace is 51% agree, then it's law, or this has got to be accepted, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's not the nation that we live in. This is not the more perfect union that was created here in America. We actually live in a constitutional republic, which is a representative democracy.
Yeah.
So we elect, our representatives who then go and represent us, there in Washington, these sorts of things. But even with that, we have to remember that it's a constitutional republic, meaning that we have a constitution that determines what we're supposed to be about. It sets, the parameters for the laws that we're going to enforce, right? So. Yeah. I'll just clean it up in this way. If 51% of Americans decided that it's okay to kill your neighbor, that would never be passed as a law. And the reason why is because the Constitution says that the government is here to protect our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? So we have this Constitution that every politician gives an oath to uphold when they take office. And their job then is to make sure that they are protecting the constitutional rights of every American, so that if 51% of the population says we don't like Bunjee, we're going to kill them, well, they don't have the right to make that law. That can't be a real law here in America, because it's outside or in conflict with our Constitution.
Yeah.
So just because X amount of people agree that abortion should be a right doesn't mean it's a constitutional right. And if it's not a constitutional right, then you can't create a law that allows for it. And so that brings us right back to the issue of, is abortion a constitutional right? And I defy anyone to show me in the Constitution where anyone has a right to abort a baby.
Yeah.
It's not there.
And something very similar happened to this not too long ago with the Obergefell decision, which the Supreme Court essentially legalized, quote unquote, gay marriage. Again, there was no inherent constitutional mention of homosexual marriage union, but what had to happen with a lot of these laws that wind up, they have to redefine certain terms, and specifically marriage. It was historically, since even before U.S., thousands of years from the time civilization started, marriage has always been between man and a woman.
Biologically speaking.
But biologically speaking. And we've always
that up now.
We've always recognized other sorts of relationships, but we've never called those marriage unions. And so, again, if you want to say something is a constitutional right, specifically abortion, but it's not specifically in the text, then of course you're going to have to go and fish it out of the penumbras of the emanations, right? And so this is exactly what's happening. And again, that's where we want to address that specific objection that, no, abortion is a constitutional right. Soon enough, we'll see if this opinion stands, this majority opinion stands, and it's no longer the case. So what are we going to do then, right? But going back to your idea of your point that we don't live in a mob rules society, and I think this is something that a lot of people need to appreciate where we live, is that from the very beginning, the Founding Fathers knew, based on the whims of people, they knew that people are not basically good, but they will always look for ways to, they tend towards tyranny, basically. And so they set up these checks and balances. And thank God we don't have a majority, simple democratic rule process here in the United States. Otherwise, many, many bad decisions would just be kind of flip-flopping every so often. And, we'd probably be living in something that looks like the Purge these days.
Wow.
But hopefully we've established so far that Roe v. Wade decision, and even Planned Parenthood v. Casey that followed after it, which used Roe v. Wade as precedent, has always been bad legal reasoning.
And Alien versus Predator.
When that time comes,
Bad reasoning.
And so to the point where you have legal scholars on both sides of the issue, as we've seen. We were talking about this earlier. They know that the writing was always on the wall. Roe v. Wade could never stand on its own 2 feet forever. They knew there was going to come a day where there's going to be a case that comes before the Supreme Court that's going to challenge Roe v. Wade. And if you have Supreme Justices worth their salt that are willing to take a bold stand and say, now's the time to address this and say, what we've basically been saying behind closed doors, that this was always bad reasoning, but now let's make it official.
Right.
And it looks like this is what we're headed into.
It looks like it. I don't know why Chief Justice Roberts would call for an investigation if this isn't an actual leak. So I assume that unless some of these justices end up being scared off by the women dressed up in handmade tailed costumes, and I don't know. That's kind of scary to me. But hopefully, the majority, those in the majority opinion right now, will hold strong.
Yeah.
If this document truly represents reality, then hopefully the justices in the majority will hold strong. Hopefully, Chief Justice Roberts will join them.
Yep.
I would like to see that. I'm not going to hold my breath, but there's already a majority for this, and if this does come down in June, I would press them to go ahead and release it now. It's already released. If it's true, it's already been released, right? Yeah. And rather than just continuing to hold everybody at bay as everybody's getting all lathered up in a tizzy, they should just go ahead and release it. Let it become the now precedent.
Yes.
And let's move forward.
And so that's where I would hope to make an appeal to people on both sides of the issue, is that whatever your opinion is on abortion, whether you're for it or against it, is at the end of the day, we live in a society where don't we want there to be good laws on the books? And if you understand that Roe v. Wade was always bad precedent, badly reasoned, then you should want to be in support of, okay, let's wipe it off and then ask the question, what do we do now?
Right.
Okay, and so that'll be our what we're going to head into our next section. But before that, I want to take a quick break and just let you know you've tuned into Studio 118. We welcome you here. Probably tuning in live stream on YouTube. If so, join our live chat, say hello, and also we have a Q&A coming up after our discussion. We invite you to ask your questions. We'll queue them up for you. If you have a question that's revolving around the topic of abortion and everything that's going on today regarding that, we'd love to hear from you. Ask your question. We'd love to continue that conversation. If you're watching on Austin Cable Access Channel 11, you can call in your question to 512-576-5433. We're discussing the controversial topic of abortion. We're trying to break it down into simpler terms and just help people reason about it. And we invite people who are in support of abortion. We're unapologetically pro-life here. And we just invite you to join in the conversation, and we'd love to hear from you. So, we're talking about, okay, so we should all be celebrating that a bad legal reasoning is now being addressed and rejected. And so now the question becomes, what happens next? And what I've heard from a lot of the people who are kind of like up in arms about this is, well, now women's rights are being taken away, and also what you're basically doing now is forcing women, basically back to the back alley again, or they're going to seek unsafe methods of abortion and whatnot. So what is actually going to happen if Roe v. Wade gets struck down? What is your understanding, Bunjee?
Well, my take on it, if I understand it correctly, what this means is that now abortion laws go back to each individual state, and is left up to each state to then determine what level of abortion, if any, they're going to allow. And so we should probably watch, as states like California and New York continue to exercise their so-called right to terminate a living organism growing within the womb of their mother. And then we'll see, states like Texas and Florida clamping down. To what degree, it remains to be seen. I know that we've already got some pretty strong laws here in Texas. We've also seen some strong laws being put in place there in Oklahoma and Louisiana, and we'll probably see some other states following suit. I've heard different numbers on how the nation might be split over this. It remains to be seen. I don't place a whole lot of stock in Republicans. So the places where you have, rhino Republican governors in charge, I don't know that you'll see much change there at all. Hopefully I'm wrong.
Yeah. And so, what you're basically saying is now this issue gets pushed back to the states.
Yes.
So now instead of having the heavy hand of the federal government forcing all the states to have a support for abortion and have a means of supporting abortion and abortion providers, now it gets pushed back to the states. And like we saw, there are a handful of states that go one way and the others go the other, right? So New York specifically, I think it was last year or the year before where they passed and they turned the pink lights on the Empire State Building for this, basically allowing abortion for whatever reason, all the way up to 9 months of pregnancy, and they rejoiced in that.
Yep.
And so you do have states that are basically experimenting with this, and this is one of the beautiful things about the United States, the way the checks and balances were set up, but it's also one of the kind of scary things if you think about it, because you have states like New York that celebrate in the terminating of young developing lives within the mother's womb, and they celebrate it. And then you have, we talked about this last episode, like Governor Northam. I think he's in West Virginia. I forget where he's from, but he was talking about how he would love to see a scenario where after giving birth, the mom and the doctor would then have a conversation about what we should do if the mom chooses to still care for that baby. If not, they would snuff it out, while after it's been born. So talking about infanticide, basically. So supporting measures like that. So that is the scary thing about, every state now gets to decide this, but at the very least, that's where Christians hopefully can now come and make an impact and start arguing for life and do it in a way that, hopefully make a bunch of Christians that will start valuing life. But yeah, it goes back to the states. So that, again, goes against the talking points of mothers' or women's rights are being taken away.
Right.
When in actual fact, this is just the democratic process taking place.
Yeah.
If you live in a state that you don't care for their abortion laws and that's really one of your priorities in life, and you want to make that something that you kind of live by it and die by it, then you have some tough decisions to make. Do I want to live in a state that supports this and whatnot? That's your choice. But in actuality, there's no right being taken away because we saw that it was never a right to begin with.
Yeah.
And so let's get our language correct on this issue.
Yeah, and then you see your talking heads, your Jen Psaki's and others like her, who are jumping on, the Squawk Box and the television and insisting that, the people who are going to be impacted the most are, the impoverished, and there's going to be women who can't afford to have a baby, but they get pregnant and they're living in a state where, they're not going to be able to get an abortion, and they can't, just drive to the next state over and get an abortion, and so those who are impoverished are going to be hurt the most by this.
Yeah.
And the whole concept is based on the idea that, number one, abortion is health care. Abortion's not health care. It in many cases causes health-related issues for the person receiving the abortion. It's not health care. The baby always dies in the process, 99.9% of the time. Yeah. There have been some survivors, but on average, the baby in the womb dies, and then there are emotional and physical consequences oftentimes for those who go through the abortion procedure, and having taken the time to interview a long line of post-abortive women who shared their stories of depression and physical issues after the fact. I know for a fact that abortion is not the healthier of the two options. The second being giving birth. Giving birth is typically more healthy for the woman emotionally and physically than the abortion. It's just a longer, slower process. But between the two options, giving birth is oftentimes, more often than not, healthier for the woman and for the baby than the abortion. But so then comes the issue of just because there's a law now that doesn't give you the right to go have an abortion, maybe become a little bit more responsible. If there's no pregnancy, then there's no need for an abortion. And so when they start arguing that, this is my right, I think the real issue with this is based on a culture that we've developed, that we've encouraged of people engaging in premarital promiscuous sex, and then how do you deal with the unwanted outcome of that being pregnancy? And those who don't want to take your birth control, those who don't want to use contraception, these sorts of things, and they want to treat abortion like birth control. Well, that's what's really being taken away. In a state like Texas, where you might not have the right to abort your baby, all the state of Texas is actually saying is we're not going to allow you to use abortion as birth control. And personally, I would celebrate that.
Yeah. There's a lot in there that as I hear you talking about, there's so many things to touch on here. Number one, you definitely hit the nail on the head, where we live in a culture today that has basically been growing from even the time of Roe v. Wade of. Back in the 60s and 70s, the free-spirited people who essentially tore down a lot of these cultural taboos at the time. And there was a big sexual revolution, and which essentially turned sexual intimacy, sexual relationships, and removed it out of its proper place. And now just kind of what you wind up with now in these days is the hookup culture, where sexual intercourse is now viewed as just a way that teenagers and young men and women kind of sow their royal oats. It's just a part of life that they have to go through. But the consequences and the aftermath of those relationships, you really don't have to worry about them. That's what they encourage us, right? Don't worry about it. It's just go have fun, go be you. Everybody's going to do it. Yep. In fact, here, let's hand out free condoms in school. And this is a culture we've been raising up for a couple of generations already.
Be responsible in your irresponsibility.
Yeah. And so I get it. And that's something that we have to, as Christians especially, look at and face the reality of this is a culture we live in, and also the assumption that whatever's in the womb, we've been repeating this already so far, whatever's in the womb is not valuable, is not a life. And I've seen so many interviews, I've seen a lot of people speak when they ask them, people who are in support of abortion, and they don't even know what the process of abortion even looks like. And so they tout the talking points of abortion as healthcare, but yet you ask them, do you understand what a D&E abortion is? Where they go in and scrape and they tear apart limb from limb this clump of cells that you call it, but then they have to put it back together to make sure they have every piece. But in the process of that, they're scraping your uterus, and that causes physical complications for the mother down the road.
And then the more abortions you have, yep, the more likely you are to have complications when you actually want to have a child.
Yeah. But that's two things. There's no education going on about what exactly an abortion is in the different trimesters. You can take a pill. That's what I think what a lot of people think it is just taking a pill. But the more that baby grows inside your womb, something's got to be done.
Yes.
And so you're essentially tearing puncturing the back of the head of that baby. And we talked about this all in the last episode. We showed some graphic pictures, by the way. So disclaimer on that if you want to watch the previous episode. So this culture that we live in, an assumption, there's no education on what an abortion is. There's a devaluing of human life because there's no disagreeing. There can't be any disagreement with the fact that whatever's in the womb is a human being. This is in every science textbook, in college textbook that doctors have to read about the science of embryology. And it said it is a unique human specimen. It belongs in the human species, and it has its own unique DNA.
Yeah.
And this is all well known. Everybody knows this. But yet, for some reason, when it comes to now defending whether or not we want to euphemistically terminate pregnancy, now all of a sudden it's non-human. It's just a clump of cells.
We don't know.
Right.
Who can say?
Yeah.
Right. I always think back to I think it was Reagan who said, I find it amazing that everyone who is for abortion has already been born.
Yeah.
So it's like
to touch on that
point.
I've been reading on social media, people that are very passionate about this, they'll go and post their long social media posts, and I saw one of this woman who gave the story of her mother and how her mother was in a bad relationship with her father, and she went and had sex and got pregnant from another man, and she wound up having an abortion for those kids. And she then went on to say, if my mom hadn't had those abortions, I wouldn't be here today. Which the dichotomy is striking there. Those lives had to die, but I value my life.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here today. I value my life. Obviously, I'm glad I was born, but she had to have those abortions.
Those children had to be sacrificed, so that I could live.
But that just goes to show you that in order to make a statement like that and actually believe it with all your heart, you have to devalue the life that was taken.
And what about the leaders who are encouraging abortion as a means to a financial or economic blessing?
Yes, talking about Janet Yellen.
How about that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that this is actually Dr. Fauci in drag, but Janet Yellen is our Treasury Secretary.
Yeah.
And it was Tuesday when she said this. She says, I believe that eliminating the rights of women to make decisions about when and whether to have children would have very damaging effects on the economy. That's right, on the economy. She's concerned about the economy, our Secretary Treasurer.
Yeah.
Right? So I find that to be very interesting. Because according to Secretary Yellen here, women must maintain the right to terminate the life of any unplanned pregnancy because this is the sacrifice that must be made for the sake of our economy.
Sounds...
this is cultic.
Communist? And
it's very cultic.
Yeah.
It's very religious, really. The concept is that, if we don't allow women to sacrifice their unborn baby, then the inflation gods might become angry, and then the economy here in America would be ruined.
Yeah,
So let's just test this out then, because so it was January 2021 when Biden appointed Yellen to the position of Treasury Secretary, right? So that's when she took over this position. Since then, there's been close to 1 million unborn babies sacrificed.
Yeah.
So under her watch, we've seen upwards of 1 million unborn babies being terminated, and yet, despite all of these human sacrifices, our economy has continued to suffer. The surge of Bidenflation is what I like to call it, which is the highest inflation that we've seen in 40 years. So, is she saying that she's saying that our economy would be even worse if those millions of babies hadn't been aborted?
Yeah. Oh man, that is gross.
So then the question is, how different is this mentality of we have to let women sacrifice their babies, otherwise the economy will suffer.
Yeah.
how is that any different from the ancient religions that encourage child sacrifice so that the rain god would send the rain and the crop god would send, would grow good crops, or the god of war would protect them from the invaders? And how's it any different?
Yeah.
So here's a writer named Brian Godawa, and in his article, this article is titled "Ancient Child Sacrifice and the Legacy of Modern Abortion." He writes this: in the same way that the ancient world pleaded with the gods through child sacrifice to save them from the suffering of diseases, famine, or wars, so today's culture pleads to Molech through abortion to save women from the suffering of poverty, oppressed status, or gender wars.
Yeah.
I have a hard time not seeing the comparison. The comparison is so clear to me that it's the same ancient cult of child sacrifice, but just cleaned up a bit, so that, you're not throwing your just born baby into the fires of Molech. No, you're going to a clinic who, vacuums or rips this child from your womb, divides up the parts, and then sells it to the college down the road that wants to do experiments on that flesh.
Yeah, it's disgusting, man.
It's pretty twisted.
And when I heard that, I just immediately was ashamed, because again, this topic of abortion, it's sad to just see how politicians specifically, right? They just find every reason to, abortion's in the headlines because of this leaked memo or whatever, and I have this hearing coming up, and let me try to make a connection between my totally unrelated field of economics, and I'm going to try to draw a correlation between that and access to abortions. Number one, it's just disgusting, again, because you're taking this very deep and personal, sensitive issue that a lot of women that have had traumatic experiences with, and now you're using it for political gain and to try to make what point?
Right.
That like our gas prices are going to go down if you kill more kids. It's just sad to see politicians constantly do this, where they don't understand. It's very tone deaf.
Yeah.
Right? Especially given the fact that you have a nation that is hotly divided on the issue. It's not like the overwhelming majority of U.S. Citizens are for abortion, no matter what Elizabeth Warren likes to say.
Yes.
But there is a hot debate still going on, and
Very
for you to
much
make a statement like that and say, do it for the regime, basically, is very disgusting and very, it's unnecessary.
And it's disturbing.
Yeah.
To see people play politics in this sort of way, to play one side off of the other in this sort of way, to try to advance like this recent Women's Act that they tried to sneak in all of this extreme decisions and processes that most Americans disagree with. Like if you were to talk to the average person and present them with that chart of the development that happens within the womb of a woman, right? If you present somebody with that chart and say, at what point in time should we stop aborting babies? Right, and we can pull that chart up here in a second. But if you were to show somebody this chart and say, at what point in this process do you think it's time to stop aborting? Chances are they're going to point somewhere in that second trimester. Some will even choose somewhere in that first trimester. Rarely will a person, if they have any kind of heart, rarely will someone point to the third trimester and say, yeah, somewhere up in here maybe. Most people would not. Most people point to the second trimester or even the first trimester as, well, I'm okay with abortion, but I would like to restrict it at this point, right? So with that being the case, then you turn around and you see the Democrats trying to run through this bill, this Women's Health Act, which would then provide women with the right to abort their baby all the way up until the day of birth. It's like, well, that's not, there's not even a mob in America that would agree with this. The clear majority would say no, not all the way up till birth.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, that even flies in the face of the concept of viability.
That's true. Yeah.
What happened to viability? Which we've seen being achieved at 20 weeks.
Yeah, we should be celebrating advancements that allow us to save babies' lives at a very young gestational age, right?
Yes.
Like we threw up a picture there earlier about a baby not just too long ago, and I believe it's 2013. She was at 20 weeks gestational age.
21 weeks right there.
Yeah, delivered at 21 weeks, and it was only at the insistence of the mother. Can you at least try to save my baby? And they said, I don't think anything's going to happen, but as a doctor, I will try. Thank God for that doctor who
incredible
did the minimal amount and gave a breathing tube, put them under some heating lamp, and their health began to stay steady.
But the question is, are they vaccinated?
That's true. But that young girl that was delivered at 21 weeks was able to go and grow. Now she's, I think, 8 years old now. But that should be celebrated.
Yeah.
And now we can see, like we say, science is never static. There's always changing. So science is always going to change based on the evidence at hand and advancements that are made. So we should always celebrate, like, oh man, babies that for whatever reason might die given complications during pregnancy, but now we have a way to save them. Wow, let's go for it.
Yes.
But what we actually are hearing from our politicians, and then just from people who catch this fervor of supporting the idea of abortion and women's my body, my choice, and you can't take away that choice from me. No, I need that decision. I need the ability to make that decision no matter where I am in the pregnancy. And what's interesting, like you mentioned, is that, there's not a majority opinion on this. And like I want to share just recent polls, as even as recent as 2021, but also 2019, a CNN poll showed that an average of 48% of respondents to that poll said that abortion should be legal under only certain circumstances. So you had Elizabeth Warren saying, 69% of Americans are pro-choice, as if it's just a binary issue. There's nothing in between. But constantly you see polls being brought up and say, should abortion be legal in every case, in only certain cases, or illegal in every case? And you always see the majority of people believe that abortion should only be legal in only certain circumstances.
Yes.
And when you break that down even further and they ask you, well, if it's only in certain circumstances, do you believe it should be most circumstances or only a few circumstances? And by and large, you see people responding, it should only be allowed in few circumstances. So I think your general populace, your general citizen has common sense and says, I know what abortion is. We don't want a lot of it. I grew up as a 90s kid, and I even remember, and I talked about this in the last episode also, in Bill Clinton's administration, the mantra was abortion needs to be safe, legal, and rare. And fast forward just 20 some years,
yep.
And now we're shouting our abortions.
Yes.
What happened? But
it's almost like our nation has seared its conscience
yes.
with a hot iron, Yeah,
it seems so.
And that's a very biblical concept there, that the more you sin, the easier it is to sin. It's like you think back to the first time you lied to your mom. Oh, I felt bad. I felt horrible. Lied to my mom. Next time I lied to my mom, it was a little easier. And every time after that, it just got easier and easier. I was searing my conscience so that the conviction just disappeared over time. And that's what we are doing as a nation. We are searing our conscience.
Yeah.
We are, engaged in so much sin now that people don't even have natural affection for babies anymore. People don't even, realize that they're doing something that is wrong, that when someone stands up and celebrates their abortion, they don't even recognize that what they're celebrating is the termination of a human being.
Yeah.
Like they don't understand that. All they think is that they got rid of a clump of cells.
Right.
and that they should have the right to do that. Listen, if you came to me and said, yeah, I've got a skin tag, I'm going to go get cut off today, I'd be like, well, all right, it's your body, your choice, go for it. Or you came to me and said, hey, I've got some cancer, I'm going to go get it, I'm going to go get it radiated, and destroy it. Go for it, yeah, good for you. I wouldn't have an issue with that. I wouldn't say, oh no, we have to outlaw, chemotherapy. We have to outlaw surgical procedures by which skin tags are removed, because I would never make that kind of an argument. No, nobody ever would. But when it comes to a living organism in the womb that has unique DNA that is going to develop into, a member of society, given the chance. Yeah, I got an issue with that. And when somebody shouts their abortion, when somebody celebrates, the demise of their child, it just lets me know that, our nation, our country, by and large, has seared its conscience so that it can't even make sense that there's such darkness in our land now that so many people can't even make sense of what they're celebrating.
Yeah. Yeah, and I what comes to mind are like celebrities recently that I know of, like Busy Phillips. You may or may not know her because I don't know how active she is now anymore. But
I'm so busy, I've never heard of her.
Nice. She was. I remember she made some sort of social media post or video or whatever, and she was basically like, "I'm glad that I had an abortion like at 13 years old or something like that," and because it allowed her to continue her acting career.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's stuff like that where we have now become a nation and a culture that, again, we have to, life has to be devalued. And let's get another thing straight here. There's always a straw man being thrown out from the people who support abortion. And they will use the language of, well, all you want is to take away women's rights, or all you want is to establish the patriarchy or whatever. But basically, you want to push women down and take away their ability to choose. But that's never been the case.
Nope.
And we need to stop talking like this, and we need to kind of truly understand, what does the other side believe? For pro-life people, the issue has always been, we believe that what is inside the womb is a precious human being, just a life, just in a different stage of development. And because it is a human life, not only by its God-given status as an image bearer of God, but even legally speaking, it's just a human, and it deserves the protection of its life. That's what's always, we want to protect that life. And yes, there are hard decisions about how do we do that, but you don't go and say, the best thing that we can do is give the mother full, complete decision-making control over whether that life lives or dies in a very brutal fashion even. We can't operate as a society like that. And so it's never been the case that pro-life people are conservative. And don't forget, there's also pro-life Democrats.
Yes.
This is a bipartisan issue, right? It's never been the case that we want to push women down and establish the patriarchy or whatever. It is the acknowledgement of what is inside the womb. It is a human life. It is living and breathing and growing. It's just in a different stage of development.
Yeah. There are pro-life atheists. There are, pro-life secularists. I mean, there are pro-life people in every facet of society who have come to a different conclusion than the people in the pro-choice camp. And to then turn around and create this straw man argument that you just want to rob me of my right, the answer is no. I question whether you should have what you call a right. I question, is that a right? Do I have a right to murder someone that is making my life inconvenient? Because that's really what it boils down to is, should Americans have the right to get rid of people that stand in the way of our personal blessings, our financial gains? I can't help but to think about how much tax money is taken from me every year and used to support other people. Isn't that my money? Like, why do I have to give our government money that they're going to send overseas or to some, to some program where someone that is impoverished is going to use it for their benefit? And well, why do I have to, support all these people? Why don't I have a right to say, oh, no, this is my stuff. I get to hold on to it, and you have no right to tell me what I get to do with my paycheck. Well, nobody's, it's like we can make those arguments and whatnot, but at the end of the day, we got taxes, we pay our taxes, and the government takes it and uses it for what they, think is the best, plan. And then, the government then turns around and says, oh, no, but you have a right to get rid of this person because they're going to be a financial strain on you. So at what point in time do we get to determine that anybody that's a financial strain or someone that's inconvenient to me, we can just get rid of? So because I have a real problem with this concept that the government can give someone the right to get rid of someone who is a strain on their on their checkbook or, an inconvenience in their life, it's like, well, now that you've opened up this door, like, where does that stop? Can't we just carry this out further and just say, well, I should have the right to just, get rid of anybody that is a challenge to my finances or an inconvenience to my life. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I can already hear, again, this is another objection that's brought up is, well, you have to consider the health of the mother. Abortions aren't just, people looking to try to further their career or whatever, but what about cases where the mother's life and health are in danger? Or what if there's a baby in the womb that is suffering from some sort of very tragic disease and they're in pain, and they're not even going to last?
Yeah.
Wouldn't the graceful thing to do, the merciful thing to do is to end their life? And so let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, we can go back to the Dobbs versus Jackson. What was that? The Jackson
Women's Health Organization.
So in that court case, the decision of Mississippi was 15 weeks. Any child that makes it 15 weeks has the right to live, unless there are complications for the mother. Right, that was one of the loopholes there. That if this is threatening the life of the mother, then that an abortion would be acceptable. Right. Now we can get into the argument of whether that's good law or not. But the point that I'm trying to make though is that in this act, in this gestational act, you see a provision for abortion after 15 weeks if the health of the mother is threatened by the pregnancy or by giving birth, right? And that wasn't sufficient.
Yeah.
That was not sufficient for the leaders there at the Jackson
Women's Health Organization.
Thank you. I don't know why I can't keep that in my mind, but
Jackson who?
So the Jackson Women's Health Organization didn't see that as being sufficient.
Yeah.
They wanted more than that. So whenever someone brings up that kind of an argument, well, what about the health of the mother? Well, is it really about the health of the mother? Because I don't know too many doctors, who would look at, a pregnancy and the health of the mother is threatened by this, and it could result in her death. I don't know many doctors who'd be like, yeah, but we're not going to have an abortion. Let's just, roll the dice and see what happens. Where is that going to happen? And if Roe v. Wade is overturned and then states start clamping down on abortion laws, to the detriment of the mother, to the death of the mother, they're going to be that strict about it. It's hard to imagine that that's going to be the case. At the same time, I've also done enough research about this to know that rarely is that the condition. Rarely is it the case where a pregnancy is going to actually bring this mother to the day of her death, right? And there are enough medical advancements to be able to go ahead and do a C-section, so and then incubators to to then save the life of the child while also saving the life of the mother. So very few cases. I mean, the smallest percentage of cases we find a pregnancy that is actually going to then put the mother's life at risk.
Yeah, so there's two lines of thought here that I want to go down. Number one is we have to understand how a supporter of abortion defines health. And even Roe v. Wade, what their decision was basically, health includes a myriad. It's just kind of broadly defined health of the mother. And what a lot of abortion supporters have interpreted that to mean is, well, that's not just physical health. That can include emotional health. Financial health, exactly. Anything that will bring a burden on the woman is a health, just as everything is infrastructure now. Yeah. So health now, it covers everything. Yep. So the fact that the woman says, I just cannot go forward with this pregnancy because I got a job on the line. Mm-hmm. And if I'm out on maternity care, I'm a single mother, I'm not going to survive, blah, 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 These are very tragic situations, but health used to mean, is the mother facing imminent death with this pregnancy? Now, I'm not trying to devalue or make light of the situations that a lot of single mothers go through, because it's known through a lot of studies that the majority of the women that go through with abortion are living in poverty, are single mothers, and are minorities. And so this is known. This is a very tragic problem that we need to deal with. But again, my question always is abortion it's not the only solution, and it certainly isn't the best solution to this. Surely, as a nation, we can come up with better solutions that don't require the killing of one human being in order to benefit another. Again, that goes back to the whole, we need to value life once more. Yeah. But just pragmatically speaking, is this really the best solution? So that's how we define health now. Secondly, whenever you try to speak against abortion and bring through your reasoning for why we believe we can value life and save life, it always comes down to, the life of the mother is at stake. But then we have to ask the question, well, like what you were already alluding to, how many abortions are actually because of the health of the mother? When women choose to report their abortions, what is the percentage of women that say, I did it because my life is at risk? Right. And here we have a very good report from the Guttmacher Institute. It was done in 2005, and it showed that women share multiple reasons, even at one time, for going through an abortion. So it's not even just one reason to consider. It's at least 2, at least 3, and sometimes as much as 8. And so they gave the women a series of like 14 reasons for why did you choose to go through an abortion? And what they found was that the overwhelming majority of the time, women chose education or ability to care for their dependents as a reason, or the inability to care for the dependents as a reason for going through with an abortion. So that's 74%. Or I just can't afford a baby right now. That was 73%.
Did you say 73?
73%, yeah.
Amazing.
Or she did not want to be a single mother or was having relationship problems. That was 48% of the reasons given. Nearly 4 in 10 women said that they had completed their childbearing, and almost 1/3 were not ready to have a child. Fewer than 1% said that their parents or their partner's desire for them to have an abortion was an important reason. So there's not a lot of coercion going on. That was just less than 1%. Also, when it gets to the actual health of the mother, like imminent death, only 13% reported that possible problems affecting the health of the fetus was a reason for going through an abortion. So consider comparing 74% for just pure economic reasons versus 13% that actually, hey, my baby's life is in danger. Or 12% reported physical problems affecting my health. So that's the mother's health. Only 12% reported that. And then even like rape and incest, which is commonly brought up as the go-to argument, rape was only 1% and incest was less than 0.5%.
Right.
And so,
and this is from the Guttmacher Institute, which is very pro-abortion.
Yes. But they're laying it out. But again, what I see is that it still makes sense to them because they view the mental health and the financial health as, dire health issues affecting women who are faced with the decision to go through with an abortion or not. And again, that also has the assumption of whatever's in the womb is not life.
Yes.
Because you can easily go through with it and carry on with your day.
And that really is the issue here because, listen, I get it. Like the idea of, carrying a child for 9 months inside of your body. What a, like if you're not wanting to be pregnant, that's a huge inconvenience. There's all the costs involved. There's all the concerns involved. There's the emotions involved. I mean, listen, attempting to walk a mile in those shoes, I'm trying to understand that, yes, this is something that is life impacting. Mm-hmm. And if there is a safe, legal, effective way of just getting rid of this whole condition, and it's not the termination of a life, then by all means go for it. Like I said earlier, if you came to me and said I'm going to go get a skin tag cut off, it's just like, yeah, go for it. Just go get your procedure and get on with your life, if that's all it is. But the question is, what's in the womb?
Yeah.
What's in the womb? Is it life? And when does it become life? When does it achieve personhood? And if you can't answer those questions, if you don't know, well, then prudence would say, don't do anything about it. Go ahead and carry the baby to full term, give birth, give it up for adoption if you can't afford it, right? I mean, the reality is that if you don't know, then prudence would err on the side of caution.
Yeah, I always like the illustration of, the mom's washing dishes, she's got her back turned and her other kid says, "Hey, Mom, can I kill this thing?" What's your response as a parent? It's going to be like, what is it? And if you don't know, you have to assume it's something, valuable. So you turn around and you have to actually figure out what it is. And if it's a cockroach, stomp on it or take it outside or something like that, But if it's a human life, no, don't commit murder, please. But again, in this culture that we're growing up in, what you have is you have Planned Parenthood, abortion services, and they refuse to show the mother an ultrasound. Their protocol is to get, once you agree to have an abortion, they schedule it very quickly. And they don't want to give you the full picture, literally speaking.
Right.
They don't want to show you an ultrasound because they understand that pictures are worth 1,000 words.
They don't want you to hear that heartbeat.
Yeah.
They don't want to tell you that a baby can feel pain. That there is ultrasound imagery of babies in the womb trying to defend themselves against,
yes,
the attack of the abortion,
instruments.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you have to ask the question, why is that the case? Why Planned Parenthood? Why are you so adamant and just fomenting at the mouth, like, we will not give an ultrasound to the mother? Why is that the case?
Yeah.
And again, we just encourage, mothers out there, there are other alternatives. Reach out to a pregnancy resource center who will gladly walk you through this decision that you're contemplating.
Well, one argument has to do with bodily autonomy, my body, my choice.
Sure.
But then from that, you also have those who begin to argue that it's a parasite.
Mm.
And I've actually heard this presented by several different women who insist that, because it's an uninvited pregnancy, that it's more like a parasite, sucking the nutrients of the mother. Clearly these people have never taken the time to study the difference between a parasite and a living fetus that's half your chromosomes, right? They haven't really taken the time to study how the body reacts to a parasite in attempting to expel it,
Yep.
versus the womb of a woman where her baby is developing safely because of the way the immune system responds to the placenta that then protects the baby from the mother's immune system. But there's a dual situation happening here, according to the research, that you have the placenta, which has this unique built-in ability to create this immunological tolerance to the mother's immune system, right? Which is then developed from the 23 and 23 chromosomes that take place at fertilization when there's an actual spark of life. Mm-hmm. There's even been footage of where they, under a microscope, have placed, the sperm to egg, and they've recorded what appears to be like this little spark of life that takes place. It's pretty incredible. But then the placenta starts to form, as the fetus is forming, as the zygote is forming, right? And meanwhile, the immune system of the mother begins to function differently as it recognizes what's happening here in the womb. And so you see, not the woman's body trying to force this parasite out of her, but actually making womb for.
Yeah, there we go.
Making
sound like
room.
Fudd there.
Making womb.
Whoa.
But making room for this fetus to develop, for the zygote to develop into a fetus, into a baby, and these sorts of things, right? That's not how a parasite functions. That's not how a body responds to a parasite. So when these women call the zygote or the fetus a parasite, they've clearly not taken the time to actually investigate what a parasite is, how it functions, and what the body's response is to that parasite. Yeah. Because what's happening in the womb of a pregnant woman is not that. Yeah. It's something different altogether. Not only that, but at the very moment where there's a spark of life, you have DNA, unique, individual, new DNA developed immediately.
Has never existed before. It is completely brand new.
That's right.
And it is not yours, yep.
And this is confirmed by a secular pro-life humanist. Mm-hmm. I referred to, atheistic and humanistic pro-lifers earlier, and this is one of these people. She's a secular pro-life humanist named Sarah Terzo, and she wrote an article called "Science is Clear, Each New Human Life Begins at Fertilization." And within this article, she writes this, and I quote her, "It's a scientific fact that an organism exists after fertilization that did not exist before. This new organism has its own DNA, distinct from the mother and father, meaning that it is a unique person."
Yep.
Now, with that, I want to address this idea of personhood.
Yes. Please.
So personhood, to consider this concept of, personhood, when it comes to this question of, well, when is the baby a person? Well, what is personhood, right? What do we mean when we say personhood, right? And I just wanted to take a moment to just offer up this definition. So personhood is defined as the quality or condition of being an individual person. Mm-hmm. How about that?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Straightforward.
So thanks, Webster.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I'm imagining Little Webster from the 90s TV show. But anyway, so personhood is the quality or condition of being an individual person. Mm-hmm. So could we say that new DNA, new individual, distinct, unique DNA is evidence of personhood?
It's its own unique person. Yep.
At what point in time after that spark of life occurs, at what point in time is there any other switch that gets flipped that is different from this DNA developing into the information that's already there?
Yeah.
So you and me, we are living out the DNA code that was present at the moment of fertilization.
Yeah, it was all set at the moment of fertilization. That DNA and that code is basically producing the necessary cells in order to create to allow us to grow into the infant phase once we're born, the toddler phase, the young adult phase, and now
Correct.
grown adults. That's the same DNA that's running through us.
So that DNA was formed at fertilization.
Mm-hmm.
And left to itself, it will develop into the full-grown adult, right?
Yeah.
That the DNA is encoded to become. Now we can get into who encodes the DNA and the hand of God on all of that and the whole process of procreation, and when we can talk about that here in a moment. But just scientifically speaking, at the moment of fertilization, sperm meets egg, spark of life, new DNA is formed, zygote now exists, the placenta begins to form as a protective barrier. Yeah. Beyond that, there is no other spark, there is no other switch that gets flipped, there is no other moment where something else is added in. You don't need more information or different information. You don't need something to come along and say, oh, we need to turn this thing on now. Or, oh, it's at the moment when they finally breathe air. That's when personhood is achieved. And I've heard this argument. I had someone actually tell me that, well, because God breathed into Adam, and that's when he became, alive, right? Yeah. Well, so hold on a second. So you're going to go back to the special creation where God took dirt and formed a human out of the dust of the earth and breathed life into him. And you're going to say that, well, that's now the assembly line standard for how God does this every single time. Well, that's ridiculous. And so we shouldn't imagine that the breath of life, which a baby cannot achieve in the womb, right? Yep. They're not breathing in the womb. Why? Well, because it's not the right environment for that. There's a different kind of development happening in the womb. And so, yes, the minute they are born, they will begin to breathe air because that's what they're designed to do. But prior to that, they're existing as the same person, just in a different situation. So, for example, if I was able to breathe in liquid and I could swim without coming up for air, would that mean that when I'm underwater I can be murdered, because I'm not breathing the same sort of, substance? Yeah. So that's ridiculous. But so in the womb now you have this DNA forming, and it will continue to form according to the code all the way to the end of their life. Right. And nothing changes. So, they're born, they start breathing air. That is different, but,
they're not a different entity at one point. And like you said, there's no switch that changes them into now a person that is worth protecting. And that is one of the big things I see, especially with like college students that, go to these talks about pro-life, and they always ask the question, well, it's just a clump of cells. And then the speakers that are worth their salt, they always ask, well, at what point then does it become not a clump of cells, right, and something worthy of protecting? And they can never answer the question, because what they've only been prepared to say and they've been just educated to say is that it's a clump of cells, but they've never ever considered what are the implications of that. When does it become a person then? When does it become a human? What are you sure that it's just a clump of cells? I mean, we're a clump of cells. So they've never been educated or thought to think critically about exactly what they are talking about. You're exactly right. That same DNA is not the mother's. It is a unique, never before existed DNA, and it is now setting forth the process of developing the different stages of development within the womb, and then even continues outside of. That's what it was designed to do. It's been going on for millennia.
Yes.
And we're surprised at this, that the fact that a mother's body is the perfect environment. It's been designed in order to support this growing life within the womb, and we try to call that a parasite. I mean, come on, we got to get serious now.
Yes.
we got to think hard and truthfully about these issues.
The argument that it's a parasite is not even, it's not even laughable. It's just sad. Yeah. It's sad that somebody could be duped into holding that position. And it's as sad as all the ladies dressing up like the Handmaid's Tale,
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I've never seen the show myself, and don't have time to read the book. You know, but my short time on IMDb reading about it just lets me know that it looks like some sort of softcore porn television series about, you know, women who are being oppressed by, you know, men who read the Bible and use that as their justification for enslaving them into some sort of, you know, sexual slavery, so that the fertile women are forced to produce babies because the population has been reduced, and these sorts of things, right? And so these ladies who are all dressing up like Handmaid's Tale characters and going to the homes of the justices and protesting, you know, the imagery is intended to communicate that if this decision is passed down, if this decision is released, then this is the first step towards this theocratic government, you know, where we're going to be forced to become your incubators. And so they have the slogan now that, you know, they drop the F-bomb, and it's, you know, F the judges and the legislators, we are not your incubators. Well, what do you put into an incubator? A baby?
Yeah.
You put a baby, right? So I mean, right there, they're acknowledging that that they don't want to be the place where these babies are being developed, right? But then furthermore, you know, along this line, you know, the concept that they're trying to communicate is that if abortion laws are set up so that women can't have abortions anymore, then we're effectively forcing them to be pregnant. It's like, well, no. Nobody forced you to go get pregnant. That decision was yours. Now we're excluding rape and incest.
Of course, yeah.
You know, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So excluding rape and incest, the person who goes and gets pregnant didn't get pregnant because of an abortion law.
Right.
There's no law on the record that says, oh, you're a handmaiden and you have to go be impregnated by these powerful political people, and you have to have their babies. There's no law that says that.
Yeah.
Like, that's the story of The Handmaid's Tale, that there's some political, you know, cabal of people who are powerful and can force, you know, fertile women to have their babies. That's not happening. There's no basis for thinking that could ever happen here in America. The anti-abortion laws are stopping you from terminating the pregnancy. Nobody told you to go get pregnant. Yeah. Nobody encouraged you to go get pregnant. I mean, if you ask me as a pastor, I'm going to tell you, be abstinent until marriage. Well, no one's ever going to do that. Well, but that's still my advice to you. Biblically speaking, I mean, we're told that sex is for the marital relationship. And for many reasons, one of which is because there's baggage. And by baggage, I mean, you know, there's relational issues that come along with marriage that are worked out in the process of learning to love one another. And then part of that is the producing of a child who then becomes part of this family. And you know, you get to experience all this together, under God's design. So then, biblically speaking, I encourage people, wait until marriage. I made the mistake when I was a youth. I didn't wait. I wish I would have. And my encouragement, having made the mistake myself of not waiting, I encourage people, wait. You know, practice abstinence until marriage. And then you get to enjoy and work through the difficulties of marriage. And in that whole process, if God blesses the marriage with children, then praise the Lord. You know, it's in the context that God has designed it. But the way we have it now, we have a society where sex is casual, sex is the hookup culture. You know, then you have the byproduct of sex oftentimes, which is pregnancy, and then people who don't want that baby because there's no real commitment in the relationship. Yeah. And so they want the quick fix. They want the easy solution, which is abortion. And then they turn around and say, well, if your abortion laws are going to force me to give birth to this, then you're forcing me to be your incubator. No, we're not. we're just not going to let you terminate the life that's in your womb.
It's always coming back to the life in the womb. Yep.
So that is the issue. What is in your womb? Yep. If it's life, then there's no constitutional right for you to terminate that life.
Exactly.
If it's not life, just show me. Show me the scientific evidence. All the science that I've seen is that life begins at fertilization. I haven't seen any science that has told me anything different from that.
Yeah, it's in the textbooks. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. Any scientist knows for a fact life, a unique human life, is created at the moment of fertilization.
And if it's life, and with life comes personhood.
Yep.
And so you can't say, well, it's not really a person. It might be alive, but it's not a person. No. The minute you have a zygote with special DNA, that has achieved personhood.
Yeah, and I've never heard anybody really give any sort of answer as to, well, how do you define personhood? Right? Even the Supreme Court justices didn't know. They said, we'll leave it to somebody else. But the way I see it, and what we shared in the last episode, was a really good argument showing that there really are no core differences between the life that is in the womb and then once you make it outside the womb, that life that exists outside the womb. There are no core differences. It really only comes down to 4 differences. And they put it in this acronym called SLED, S-L-E-D. The only differences are size, the level of development, the environment, and the degree of dependency. Those are the only core differences between the life that exists in the womb and outside. So size, obviously, it's smaller. Do we choose to kill things that just because they're small, right?
Sometimes.
Even Horton Hears a Who got it right. A life is a life no matter how small, right?
That's right.
Level of development. I mean, think about the implications of saying, well, if the life inside the womb is not to the level of development that is satisfactory for me, then I have my decision to kill it or to terminate it. But think of the implications. Think of like Down syndrome kids. We've seen nations go that route, and they're proud of the fact that they've eliminated 97% of Down syndrome in their nation. It's like, are we really proud of this, that we've killed a whole bunch of kids with Down syndrome?
I think it's horrible.
Yeah. So level of development. Think about what that means for the elderly or anybody who goes into a coma. Their level of development, they're no longer able to rationalize or work out their own life. Are we able to kill them? Now, sadly enough, there is a assisted suicide movement going on as well. Again, just devaluing life.
I used to be pro-euthanasia. But that's because I thought it was just kids overseas.
There we go.
Yeah. Hey-o.
Yeah, environment, where they are. And that really doesn't make a difference. Just 8 inches down the birth canal, and you're going to determine whether that life deserves to be cared for.
Yeah, seems
And
ludicrous.
then lastly is degree of dependency. I mean, toddlers. Think of a toddler. They can't survive on their own, even outside of the womb. What are you going to do about that? So anyways, we got to pause here. Sorry to do that so abruptly, but we're going to leave our stream for Austin Cable Access Channel 11, but we're staying on YouTube live stream, so please stick with us. Jump on that YouTube channel. We'll be back in a little bit. All right, welcome back. That was just a brief interruption. We had to drop our stream off of Austin Cable Access Channel 11, but we're still here live on the YouTube live stream. Again, we encourage you to get on that live chat, say hi, and also drop in your question. We're just a short time away from going into our Q&A session. We'd love to hear from you. Any clarifying questions you may have, or maybe you just completely disagree with us and you want for us to hear your thoughts on the matter. We'd love to continue that conversation. So please let us know in the live chat there. And again, if you're watching this live stream, we encourage you to share the live stream link. This is a very controversial issue. We get it, but also we believe it's a conversation worth having. There's a lot of information out there and a lot of people on both sides, and we're just trying to bring a balance to all of it. And of course, as a Christian and in support of life in the womb, we believe there are good reasons to believe that we should be protecting those lives. And so we would love for everybody to hear this information. So please share that link if you can on your social media platforms. But right now, we've just finished discussing, a bunch of objections that we hear, namely, what is in the womb. We've established that it is a human life, it is a human person. and with that, we should grant it all the protections that we have afforded to us, given the Constitution, but even more importantly, just the moral law written on our hearts. Life comes from God. Every human being is made in the image of God.
Yep.
And because of that, we have inherent dignity and worth. And it is not for us to treat it so callously and just devalue it and say, if you get in the way of my career, as we saw with that Guttmacher Institute poll and study, showing that the vast majority of abortions are for the reasons of furthering my career, and I believe that I just can't afford it right now, or it's not the right time.
Right.
Given those reasons, are those really good reasons to end a life in the womb? And we say no.
And to be fair to those who are having the abortions, I would assume that they don't really believe that there's life in their womb, right? So I don't think that a person that normally gets an abortion is thinking, I'm terminating a life, right? I don't think they've really thought it through to that degree. So just to be fair to them, I do think that they've been duped by an abortion industry and by political leaders who are using these women, as pawns in their scheme. But at the end of the day, it's important to remember that the Constitution of our country finds its origins in the Bible. Our founding fathers, for the most part, were Bible-believing believers, those who had placed their faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. And when you look at the foundations of our nation's constitution, they're pointing to the God who created the universe, the laws of nature and nature's God, right? So then when we look at the Constitution, when we look at the Bill of Rights, when we look at the amendments that follow, all of this is stemming from a concept of protecting the unalienable rights of the American citizen so that we can enjoy life and liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. All of this stems out of the scriptures. And so taking it to the source then, if we cut past Roe v. Wade, cut through Griswold, get back into the 14th Amendment, which is amending the Constitution, which stems from the concept of inalienable rights, that being the right to life, and finding the source for that life, which is found in the Bible. Well, we have a God here who hates the hands that shed innocent blood. That's what he says.
Yeah.
That there's several things that he hates. Yeah, God hates some things. And one of those things that he hates, the hands that shed innocent blood. And that should be a warning to any abortion, I say doctor, but any abortionist out there who makes a living on shedding the blood of the innocent. God hates your hands and would call that person to repent of their sins and trust in Jesus Christ for forgiveness, because apart from the forgiveness that comes from Jesus Christ, there's no hope for them. God will have his day of vengeance, and he will cast those murderous people into the fires of hell unless they repent and trust in Jesus Christ. God hates the hands that shed innocent blood. And that's, this is the material that the founding fathers of our nation were reading when they turned around and then wrote the Constitution that then sets the parameters of our laws here in America. But then there's so much more in the scriptures about the God who believes in life in the womb.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of verses that we're going to share here. I'll begin with Psalm 139. There we learn that David is celebrating his Creator and says, "You formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth." So here you have King David. he's worshiping his Creator and acknowledging the fact, and this is by the leading of the Holy Spirit, that he realizes that it was God who was forming him there within the womb as he was being covered right there in his mother's womb.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, he acknowledges that even within the womb, he was still David. He was the same person through and through. A similar experience here in the New Testament when we read about the story of when Mary was pregnant, Luke chapter 1, when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary, who came to visit her, that the baby leaped in her womb. And at that point, Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. But
incredible. Just
at the presence of, there's another person coming nearby and perhaps kind of a little spiritual recognition going on there. But the baby, John, in Elizabeth's womb leaped at the very, presence or just hearing the sounds. But that is a human being responding to the environment around it.
And anecdotally, I know that there is some level of connection between me and the babies who were here at this church in their mother's womb for 9 months. And there's like a recognition. I think the first time they see my face and hear my voice, that there's like I see it, and I know this is just anecdotal, but I can't even tell you how many times that, there's been a mom here. She, was pregnant, and sat through Bible study after Bible study for months and months. And then she gives birth. And then there's like an awareness at some point where the child puts the voice that they've been hearing through the amplification together with my face, when they see me and hear my voice for the first time. And then it's like this, there's like a recognition, and it's just amazing to see that.
Yeah, I mean, when we were having kids and, you sign up for these newsletters or whatever, and always the encouragement is talk to your child when they're in the womb, because they've seen over and over again that there's connections being made. They will recognize your voice, and to the point that later on in the pregnancy stages, they will now kind of start seeking you out and start moving in a certain way so that you will talk to them, and because they will recognize your voice.
Wow.
And they love hearing that. So yeah, it's
that is awesome.
Again, just goes to show that it is a living, breathing human being.
Now when they see me, they always look disappointed.
You're like,
that's
man.
another issue though.
Get me away. Again, in Jeremiah, Old Testament, chapter 1, this is it says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you as a prophet to the nations." This is awesome. God speaking to Jeremiah, just acknowledging life in the womb. And what's interesting also is that, the Bible, a lot of people, want to say that the Old Testament is just kind of like this dark ages, kind of Bronze Age, immoral, God of war type ethics. But listen, in Exodus chapter 21, when God was giving the law to the people, he actually made a provision for, if somebody kills a baby in the womb. So the command went like this: if men fight and hurt a woman with child so that she gives birth prematurely, yet no harm follows, he shall surely be punished accordingly as the woman's husband imposes on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if any harm follows, then you shall give life for life. Wow. So this is kind of is essentially saying, if you harm that child, you're still going to get a punishment, because even though no harm came to it, but you were still intending to cause harm. But if that baby dies prematurely in the womb, then you're responsible. Your life will be taken. That's capital punishment. Yeah. That's basically saying a life for a life. It's not a life in exchange for a clump of cells or something inferior. It's straight life for life. So this is as explicit as it gets here in the Bible. And again, just through and through the scriptures, we see that in Genesis 1:26, where God mentions during the creation account, let us make man in our own image. And that's where it all begins.
Yes.
We're made in God's image. We're a special creation. And there's a reason. We're going in our youth class, we're going through Ecclesiastes, and we just finished going through a portion where Solomon says God has put eternity into our hearts. there's this strong desire, just by virtue of being a human being, we long for eternal things.
Yes.
And that's just something that we always look out for. And we're the only creation here, the special creation here on this earth that does that. We contemplate, we think deeply about things, and we long for something greater than ourselves. But it all starts as being made in the image of God, and that all starts in the womb. We have to understand that.
Now, I would point out one more thing. I do believe in the age of accountability. And so what that means is that every aborted baby, I do believe, goes straight to heaven, right? And so then what is the spiritual attack then that is leading towards widespread legal abortion? Why would the enemy, being that we believe in the devil, we believe in the demons, we believe that they are initiating a lot of this and deceiving people into thinking this is okay, if they have the sense that these babies are all going straight to heaven the minute they're aborted, what's the gameplay? What's the plan here? What's the scheme? Why is it that they are attempting to lead our nation down this path? And with that, having thought this through, for years and years now, it seems to me like that there's probably a blinding and a hardening that abortion causes for those who take part in this, right? So I think about when Paul tells us that women will be saved through childbearing. And it's a confusing passage because we know that, a woman's not going to get saved because she has children. And I take the verse to mean that there is a sort of spiritual enlightenment that happens through pregnancy and birth. And I've seen it happen where single moms, ended up pregnant, gave birth, and through the process came to Christ. Where the realization that now I've got this person to take care of, and that I have to figure out how to feed them and lead them, I've seen many moms come to faith in Jesus Christ through the pregnancy. And so I think that's what Paul means when he's talking about women will be saved through childbearing. So then, is it possible then that the enemy is actually attempting to stop those salvations, stop those aha enlightening moments for mothers by leading them to harden their hearts through abortion so that, these babies go straight to heaven, but the enemy still lays claim to those who are being hardened through the abortion process? So it's possible. It's just something that I've considered and what is the game plan of the enemy, knowing that these babies all go straight to heaven. Is it, number one, to destroy the conscience of these women, and number two, to destroy the soul of this nation through innocent blood? God does promise to avenge the innocent blood, and there is a blood guiltiness on the nation that sheds the blood of the innocent. And so I do believe that the enemy has been gearing up to destroy this nation through the shedding of innocent blood, and mainly through abortion. So, yeah.
Very interesting. So, maybe we want to kind of close out on one more topic here, Bunjee.
Yep.
How then, if it is the case that inevitably Roe v. Wade is going to get overturned, now, like I was saying, now starts the hard part. It's kind of like starting from scratch.
Yeah.
But you're actually starting at a deficit because you're already in a culture that is wanting to have abortion on demand. How then, as a Christian, now that you don't have the heavy hand of federal government over you, and now you're more free to try to convince people using the democratic and legislative process, but most importantly, by spreading the gospel message and using that transformative supernatural process of changing people's hearts and their spirits to value life. What is our game plan here? How can we as Christians kind of mobilize ourselves and do that hard work? What are some suggestions that you may have?
Well, I certainly, think that we should be a part of the political process. I know that there's Christians even today who, pull back from politics and, just avoid it altogether, and for many reasons. One of them, which is that, it seems like so many in politics on both sides of the aisle don't really care to do anything except, just promote their own agenda so that they can, end up with a really nice home and a lot of money that they somehow acquired along the way, But I can see where there is a frustration with the political system where not much is done. I think that we see the Republican Party trying to do to some degree slow the left from moving too far left, but the whole thing is moving. If you look at the most conservative Republicans today, they're kind of basically centerline Democrats from about 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. So the whole thing is just kind of moved to the left, and the progressives to the far left are running as fast as they can in that direction, thinking that this is progress, when really it's just taking us right back to cultic idolatry of child sacrifice. Amen. And so I understand the Christians who look at the political system and say, what, I'm not interested. I'm just going to sit over here and pray and just leave it at that. So, hey, pray. Yes, we most certainly need to be praying. We need to be praying, but also we need to recognize that God has blessed us with the opportunity to have a voice in our political system. And sometimes what that means is that we need to go look for third-party candidates that actually line up with our biblical beliefs. Now, some would then argue that you're just throwing away your vote, and I would argue that anytime you cast a vote, you're not throwing it away, even if it's for a third-party candidate, because ultimately, at the end of the day, God is the one who raises up kings, and he's the one who brings them down. So in a scenario where both of your two-party candidates end up unable to step into that position that they may have been elected for, then the third party is going to be the one that ends up in that position. So, why not at least go and cast your vote for someone that you can actually get behind? But at the end of the day, though, it's not the politics that is going to change hearts. So with that, I would say, I think we should be a part of the political system and do our best to use the political system that we have to legislate biblical morality, because all politicians are going to legislate morality. The question is, what brand? What is the standard, right? So those who would say, well, don't be a part of politics because it's not your, it's not your, you don't have the right to legislate your morality on me. Well, at that very moment they're trying to legislate their morality on you, right? So yeah, we should attempt to legislate biblical morality through politics, but at the end of the day, we have to remember that politics is downstream from culture, and we change the culture with the gospel message. Mm-hmm. I didn't become pro-life and then a Christian. I became a Christian, and because I became a Christian, I ended up becoming pro-life. Yeah. And so, yes, let's take part in politics. Don't hold your breath, though. The storm is not coming. But Jesus is. And that's really where we need to get over there and get involved in a grassroots effort to preach the gospel, lead people to Jesus Christ. And as we lead them to Jesus, the Holy Spirit will transform their lives and then turn them into pro-lifers, which then impacts politics. So that's my encouragement. Take part in politics, but keep your trust in Jesus Christ and fulfill the Great Commission so that we can make an impact on politics by reaching the culture for Christ.
Yeah, right on. And I forgot to mention, with this whole leak memo and stuff, and people are kind of seeing the writing on the wall. Now the crazy thing that you've seen is our CEOs of large companies offering, and even nonprofits offering to pay for travel for women to go get an abortion wherever they can. If you live in a state that outlaws it, we will pay you upwards of $4,000 to go and travel and get an abortion. So
free Teslas.
Free Teslas, yeah. So it's very interesting. Yeah, Elon Musk was one of those people, right?
Yep.
And so over here, you have a lot of conservatives touting free speech is back because he bought Twitter, and it's everything's going great. And then he's like, I'll pay for women's abortions. I was like, he wasn't the savior we thought.
well, he posted a little cartoon of where he stands politically, and how the Overton window has shifted. And so he's actually ended up in what appears to be the conservative, the center conservative camp, but not because he moved. It shows him standing in the same spot, and the whole Overton window shifting.
Yeah, he's always had that opinion.
Yeah, he's no different. I mean, he's the same guy with the same politics. It's just that when he bought Twitter and promised to make it a place for actual free speech, all the conservatives are like, oh, Elon, he's our hero, and next thing you know, he's saying, and I'll pay for your abortion too. And all the conservatives went, everybody shut up, be quiet, just be quiet,
wait it out,
don't say nothing.
I saw a CEO of Yelp wrote this 1,000-word essay, op-ed about how, women's rights are so important and blah, blah. And so he's offering also to pay for women's abortion.
I'm going to go share my opinion about his post.
Yeah, honestly. Give him a bad Yelp review.
1 star.
I work for a big tech company, and, I saw the rumblings. People were pressuring our CEO. He was going to kind of issue he addresses the employees every so often, and there was a big pressure. When are you going to stand up for women's rights? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And I think he learned his lesson, with all the whole COVID experience and him taking a stand on that, and even on the transgender issues. And he actually sat right. He refused to make a statement, which I was kind of proud of, but at the same time, it's like, it's weird. All this to point out what you're saying is that now is the time to start those grassroots efforts. We need to be praying for boldness. We need to be praying for courage and opportunities to share the gospel. We live in an amazing country where we have free speech for as long as we can hold on to it.
Until the ministry of truth.
So let's redeem the time.
Is in place.
Yeah, let's redeem the time while we inch closer and closer to the return of our Savior. And, we're called to make disciples.
Yeah.
And man, let's use these really contrasting issues that happen in our culture that really kind of strike a division.
Yeah.
Let's take advantage. Let's head straight forward into that battle.
If we could just find like 2,000 mules to get the gospel tracts out into the world.
Still don't know what that refers to. I'll watch it later.
Don't we have some questions?
Yeah. So that's great. Good discussion. Again, we encourage you to watch our old episode. We've gone through a lot of this information. There's some stuff we didn't touch on from that last episode, so I encourage you to watch that one. But right now, we're going to head into our Q&A session. Here's our first question, Bunjee. Do you all, or y'all, this is a Texan speaking, do y'all think this is the beginning of a turning point for this nation, either politically or spiritually?
Say it more Texan.
Y'all, here's my Sam, what's his name? Anyways, do y'all think this is the beginning of a turning point for this nation, either politically or spiritually?
Nice. Well done. I would love to think so, but and listen, I pray for revival, and I hope to see revival, and I can't say for 100% certain that we're on the cusp of the rapture of the church. But I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that we are watching the great apostasy happening. The falling away from the church, I think, is taking place. I think as we look at the state of the church, by and large, it's very biblically illiterate because, for the most part, attendees have, heaped up teachers that will tickle their itching ears, and as a result, you do see large swaths of what would be called Christianity following after false teachers and doctrines that really aren't Christian. And so I do think that we're watching the great apostasy happening, which means that the rapture of the church is right around the corner. And so, no, I have a hard time believing that this is some sort of turning point for the nation. I hope so. And you know, I don't mean to be too pessimistic about the whole thing. I would love to think that, you know, the overturning of Roe v. Wade is going to, you know, open people's eyes, and there's going to be conversions, and people are going to come back to the Lord, and there's going to be revival and all these sorts of things. That would be wonderful, and I hope that I'm completely wrong about this, but no, I think that this is just going to further the divide. It's going to, it's going to ramp up the fight from the left, and the leaders on the right don't really seem to be in the fight. Mm-hmm. You know, so, you know, you have your leaders like DeSantis, you know, who I would argue is a bit of a fringe character in the Republican Party. I'm personally not Republican myself. I'm an independent voter. I vote for people that I feel like the Lord is leading me to vote for because they line up with the scriptures. So I don't vote necessarily party line. But, I guess what I would say is that, the Republican Party is not filled with DeSantis's. Mm-hmm. I think that the Republican Party is, kind of filled with, a lot of people who really aren't in the fight.
Sure.
And they love to use anti-abortion rhetoric to secure elections because of the community that they live in. But, and I was impressed to see, all the Republicans voting correctly on this Women's
Health Act.
Yeah. So I was impressed to see they all stood their ground on this, and I applaud them for that. But at the end of the day, I think our nation's going down, and I think we're being set up for the time of tribulation, and as far as the scriptures go, there's not much about America in the time of tribulation. So,
okay.
Yeah,
so don't be such a downer, man.
I wish I could say, oh yeah, this is the turnaround point. We're going to repent. God's going to pour out His blessings, and I wish I could say that, and I hope that does happen. So it's not that I don't want to see that. Of course I do.
Yeah.
I would just be surprised if it does go down that way.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean, obviously, that Christians should just stop.
Nope.
We need to push forward. We've been called to
fight the good fight of faith.
Yeah, fight the good fight of faith.
Yep.
Make disciples. That's what we've been called to, and be ready in season and out of season. And so that's what we got to continue doing. But yeah, if you're looking for a turning point, it'd be awesome to see if it were like, oh man, the nation kind of waking up. Like I said, the abortion supporters did not see it coming this quickly.
Yeah.
They saw the writing on the wall, but it kind of just abruptly happened. And maybe this is time for people to wake up. Cautiously optimistic, but realistically.
I just think the Democrats are using this as a distraction from how bad Biden actually is.
Yeah, we have many other issues that are facing that will directly affect our day-to-day lives, for sure, that we should be thinking about and working to resolve. So,
but I'll celebrate the win.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
All right, second question. What about ectopic pregnancy? Is it okay to get an abortion then? When the mom's life is at risk? Yeah, this is something we didn't get into during our conversation, but let's talk about the ectopic pregnancy. Mm-hmm. This again goes to sometimes an objection that gets brought up. What about the health of the mother?
Right.
Haven't you heard of ectopic pregnancy? So what is an ectopic pregnancy? This is a pregnancy that occurs when a fertilized egg implants and it grows outside of the uterus.
Yeah.
And it usually kind of implants itself in the fallopian tube.
Yeah.
So once it's making its way through that short little, trip down the fallopian tube, but somehow, and is actually kind of quite common enough. So I think it's 1 in 100 pregnancies.
I think it's 2 in 100.
Yeah, something like that. So 1 in 50. And they wind up having ectopic pregnancies. Now you have to get into the issue of what happens. Medically speaking, this pregnancy will not survive. I don't think it ever survives. If you allow this ectopic pregnancy to continue, you definitely put the mother's life at risk. Very imminently. There can be a burst fallopian tube, and now you risk there can be an infection or just bleeding out and dying. So the mother can die as a result. And so an abortion supporter will usually use this and say, aha, so you are for abortion in certain circumstances. And here's where we want to make a distinction in saying, it's one of those moral dilemmas, kind of the trolley problem. Are you going to allow 2 lives to die? Or are you going to make that tough decision and you have to take the life of one life at least, right? Here's where we're not showing glee. We understand it's a very tragic situation that one life has to be taken. But when we can for sure save one life, let's do our best to do that. But we're still going to mourn and at the tragedy that one life had to be taken. And it's very, very different, again, from the vast majority of abortions, which are elective in nature. They're for personal convenience factors, not for the health of the mother.
If we can say with all certainty, this child's not going to survive this, and if you don't do something about it, the mother is going to die too. If that's the scenario we're talking about, then the idea that you're going to save as many lives as you can is correct thinking. In this process, I will save as many lives as I can. And if that's 1, then it's 1.
Yeah.
And if it's 2, then it's 2. But that's a lot different from saying, this is an inconvenience. This is going to cut into my finances. This growing in my womb is going to keep me from hanging out with my friends on Friday night. And so therefore I have the right to get rid of it. No, you don't. You don't have the right to terminate a life that you helped start because now you think it's inconvenient. And you can't use the outlier of this ectopic pregnancy as an argument to justify this other.
Yep.
This is the termination of a life out of, it wasn't my time for this. Well, it's your time now. That's just that you have a life in you now. And if we can show that it is life scientifically, and we can, you don't have the right to terminate that life, no matter how inconvenient it is. Mm-hmm. That's different from there's a deformation here. There's something incorrect about the formation of this child. The child is going to die. And if we don't do something, the mother's going to die too.
Yeah.
Well, I think the doctor should do their best to save as many lives as possible.
Yeah. That's their obligation.
Yep.
If they're a doctor, that's what they swore an oath to do.
Yep.
Is to save lives. And what that's very interesting also is that you ask a person who supports abortion, and it boggles my mind also how doctors are in support of this, but there are cases where we have, again, medical advancement allows us to even at certain times perform surgery on a fetus, on a developing baby inside of the womb with minimal invasive procedures. And perhaps there's a surgical procedure that needs to be done on the baby in the womb. And we can do that now in certain instances. But at that point, the doctor that's a patient. They treat it as a living human being because rightfully so, that's what it is. But you can't go then and end the surgical procedure and then say, okay, now you're back to not being alive. You're just a clump of cells. And if your mother chooses to abort you after this because she doesn't want to for whatever reason, that's totally fine because you're just a clump of cells. We can't be living in these inconsistencies.
Nope.
We have to point these out.
Yep.
And I think that brings up another issue that we probably didn't touch on enough during our conversation is couple that with what do we do now as Christians is, do we only care about the life up to birth? What do we do after birth? And I think that's where Christians everywhere need to really become more familiar with pregnancy resource centers. Get to know your local pregnancy resource center. Start a relationship with them. And whenever you meet a woman who is preparing to have an abortion or contemplating it, you can point them to their pregnancy resource center. Or if you have the means to do it, if your church has the means to do it, and probably start something up within your church, support them in that way. it's time that we no longer allow the abortion supporters to kind of claim that, well, you just care about them up to birth.
Right.
How many kids have you taken in your home? Man, we can point to so many people who would love to take your child into their home. But let's get to know them.
I like Abby Johnson's way that she addresses that, which is that, are you going to complain about the oncologist, who spends zero time, trying to cure heart disease? Like, at what point in time would anybody ever say, oh, you practice oncology? Well, so you don't care about people with heart disease?
Yeah.
It's like, well, no one's making that argument. Or the philanthropist who says, I send all my money to Africa. Oh, so you don't care about Ukraine?
Yeah.
It's just like, well, hold on a second. I'm focusing my efforts here. If you want to focus your efforts over there, go for it. If you think, we need more money in Ukraine, don't worry, Biden will write that check soon. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of like, well, sure, I agree with you that, hey, we should do everything we possibly can to help in every stage of the process. But hey, there's ministries out there. Some of them focus on this part of it. Some of them focus on that part of it, right? And some can take it all in. Yeah. But the argument that, well, because you don't really care about, the baby after birth, it's like, well, number one, you don't know that. Yeah. You're assuming that. Number two, so what? So what? Like, why is that your argument? Why is that the issue that you're taking? That I care about this life prior to birth, so that it's protected, so that it can be born. And then, I'll let someone else, deal with, the raising, the rearing, all of that. So,
my part of the process was to convince you that it's alive so that it can be protected.
Right.
And then somebody else with the means and probably a calling to do that can go in and protect them even further.
If there was legislation being presented that all kids in adoption agencies can be murdered, well, then we're going to do that show next.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But until that legislation is being passed upon some penumbra of an emanation,
Penumbras.
So we've got a series of questions from the peanut gallery here.
Yes, let's see.
Our good friend Matt, who has been on the show a few times, has 5 questions, and I'm guessing at least 1 or 2 are serious.
Let's see this first one. If abortion becomes illegal, what am I and my significant other going to do if my birth control fails? I think we've touched on this a little bit about basically coming to grips with the reality of what sexual intercourse leads to. And this is just today in this current culture where people don't have that understanding. They're living in the hookup culture. Sex is just used as a casual, let me get my endorphins out, let me get my wiggles out, and it's really nothing to them. But whenever that pregnancy does come, you can best believe that a lot of people are scrambling for that morning after pill because they don't want it. But first of all, I would say is that we need to teach, at least starting within our own families and within the church and just reaching out from our community there, we need to come to grips with a healthy sexual ethic. What are the birds and the bees talk, basically? What leads to what?
Yeah. Yeah, and taking this, taking this question seriously, the couple where the birth control fails and the sexual interaction results in a pregnancy, well, then the question is, do you want to be a person who values life or devalues it? Do you want to be a part of the group that dehumanizes the child in the womb or celebrates that life? And my encouragement is to celebrate the life, to enjoy your nude baby, and raise them according to the scriptures.
Yeah.
Yep. So question number 2, do you want to go there?
you?
How dare you?
Without a uterus.
I am angry.
I'm angry. Without a uterus, how can either of you men have an opinion on this subject?
Whole lot of assumptions going on here.
Well, me, it's just easy. I have opinions on a lot of things I probably shouldn't have. Yeah, without a uterus. Interesting. Well, to that, I would just say, whataboutism? What about the Supreme Court justices?
Mm-hmm.
So that's my.
What about the 5 men who decided Roe v. Wade?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm good. I can have an opinion. Who are you?
Yeah, when it comes to justice, when it comes to morality,
Yes.
and issues that don't impact me directly, I can still have an opinion.
Yep.
You know, I will never be a woman who is raped and murdered, right? That's, because I'm not a woman, right? And so therefore, I'm never going to, have to walk down a dark alley and worry about that creepy dude in the corner, right?
Yep.
So, but then does that mean that I can't weigh in on the criminality and the immorality of raping women?
Yeah.
Because I'm not a woman, I shouldn't talk about, how bad it is for,
Yeah, you don't have their shared experience or.
So it's just ridiculous, I would completely oppose any legislation that would permit rape to be, a cultural norm, or legal, right?
Yeah.
And so the concept that, well, you're a man, so you don't get to have a say about this issue of abortion.
Only if you agree with abortion, though.
Well,
that's always the inconsistency.
But that is the complete inconsistency is they have no problem with the 5 men who decided Roe v. Wade,
or anybody who wants to become an ally and speak up for them.
Right. But then they also take issue that, last night they're protesting at Amy Coney Barrett's house. This is a woman who is pro-life.
Yeah.
So
she's allowed to have an opinion.
So much for pro-choice.
Yeah.
You're not going to give her the choice. Like you got to protest in front of her house because you don't like her choice.
Yeah.
It breaks down all over the place.
Inconsistencies all around.
Number 3.
You've mentioned the movie Alien in this talk.
Yes, I have.
Is abortion okay if someone is infected with such an alien spawn?
I think that kind of solves itself, right?
It'll come out.
So,
it's gonna come out.
It's going to come out
when it's well and ready.
In Alien, mother doesn't kill baby, baby kills mother.
Yes, all right. I think this is a deep one here. If my daughter gets pregnant, how can I allow a pregnancy to ruin her life when she's so young and has her whole life ahead of her?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a rough one. That is a tough one. But it's also based on assumption that doing the wrong thing will make my daughter's life right.
Yeah.
If abortion is wrong, and if it's the termination of a life, well, then how is that going to make your daughter's life better if she is physically scarred from the procedure and emotionally wrecked from terminating that life, and then she carries that baggage for the rest of her life? Did you do her any favors?
Right.
So then the question is, okay, so what's the basis for a moral standard here? Mm-hmm. And that's what I would encourage someone with this real question, to consider, like, what is the basis for this moral decision? And if you don't have a basis, I'd like to suggest maybe turn to the Bible.
Yeah, once we start getting down the utilitarian, route of, well, I will only love my daughter, or my daughter can only have a successful life, whatever we define that as, if she goes through with this abortion, because we essentially try to plan out the future so far in advance, but then we forget to take into account, what if this baby, we can still redeem this tragic event? We can redeem it and make the most out of it. Is life going to be tough? I'm sure it is, no doubt. But does that mean then we have to go and snuff out a life again? Are we going to devalue life?
Tragedy, adversity, difficulty, these are things that turn people into amazing creators and producers, life changers. I mean, when you hear the testimonies of people who have really made an impact on the world, it was usually born out of some sort of tragedy or difficulty. For example, Bruce Wayne, when his parents were shot in the alley.
It's late. It's getting late, guys.
Number 5.
No, you're right. Oh, well, sorry. Just to end on that, number 4 is this always points back to is what kind of support system are we as Christians building up? Because inevitably you will hear, there are some kind of fundamentalist Christian circles that will do anything they can to kind of shame their children whenever they have an experience like this, right? But that's not, again, the example that we're given, and that's not the example we're supposed to move forward with. So, as we said at the outset, we serve a God who is forgiving, who's ready, willing, and able to just give you grace upon grace. And I think that's the way that we should carry forward.
I don't think we should even entertain the 5th question there.
Yeah. That's all good.
I'll just let Matt know that it's my way or Baha'i way.
Here we go.
That's horrible.
Okay, let's see.
So one last question.
Yeah, one last question here. If it seems more disgraceful that a man be killed in his own home than in his field, since for every man his home is his sanctuary, how much more abominable is it to be considered to kill a fetus in? I think this is part of the same question. The womb who has not yet been brought to light, the unborn, though enclosed in the womb of his mother, is already a human being, and it's almost monstrous crime to rob it of its life, which it has not.
I don't see the question, but it's a good point, and I think this person is raising a good contrast, or at least presenting us with the concept that, if the murder of a man working in his field is bad, and we agree that that's bad, how much worse than a developing fetus within the safety of the womb of their mother? And I think it's a very good point.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is our last question. I see no other. So let's kind of wrap this up, Bunjee. Essentially, this hot topic, it's not going away anytime soon. Even with if Roe v. Wade gets brought down, this is not going away anytime soon. So Christians, hopefully we've established that there is bad precedent, bad legal reasoning around Roe v. Wade, so we can kind of move on from that and say, let's start the hard work of now trying to convince people to value life. Let's start to try to change culture from that point. And of course, that means by changing lives and souls to become Christians, because even from the scriptures, we see a clear and convincing precedent of the value of life, the worth of life, because we're all made in the image of God. And so, again, if you're our audience out there, if you're listening to us, and hopefully we've established some good reasons to become pro-life, to value the life in the womb. And again, if you disagree with us, we'd love to hear from you. We're always willing to hear from our audience, but hopefully we've been able to come across clearly and convincingly. And we invite you to, again, share this episode with all your friends, especially ones who are pro-abortion or maybe even considering or contemplating abortion. We just invite you to share this with them and hopefully pray for them, and hopefully we can see good reasons to value the life in the womb. And again, we encourage you also to get to know your local pregnancy resource center and point people their way that can give them all the information they need and hopefully save a baby's life there. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next month. I'm Reuben, this is Bunjee, and we are signing off. Good night.